Hey there, welcome to Broaderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Room number 13. I arrived at the Hotel Crestwood just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. The hotel loomed before me, a towering structure that seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. My breath caught in my throat. There was something undeniably eerie about it. As I stepped through the ornate glass doors, a chill danced along my spine. The lobby was quaint yet had an unsettling quality, with velvet curtains that seemed to whisper secrets. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with hollow cheeks and a distant gaze, greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the Crestwood. You're in room number 12, just down the hall," she said, handing me an old-fashioned key. As I turned to leave, I noticed something odd, a door at the end of the hallway that read room number 13. My heart raced. The peculiar thing was that it wasn't on any map or list of the hotel's accommodations. I glanced back at the receptionist, who had returned to her paperwork, her expression blank. Curiosity gnawed at me. I made my way to my room, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that had settled over me. The air was thick with an inexplicable tension, as if the very walls were holding their breath. I dropped my bags and took a moment to collect my thoughts. The room was small but cozy, with floral wallpaper and a worn-out armchair in the corner. I unpacked, but my mind kept drifting back to that mysterious door. What lay behind it? Was it simply a storage room, or something more sinister? The urge to find out grew stronger, eclipsing the rational part of my mind that warned me against meddling with the unknown. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the hotel settling, the creaks and groans of old wood and plaster. Yet, there was something else, a soft whisper that seemed to echo through the hallways, beckoning me to come closer. Sleep eluded me as I stared at the ceiling, grappling with a sense of impending doom. The next morning, I ventured down to the lobby for breakfast, still haunted by thoughts of room number 13. The other guests milled about, but they were absorbed in their conversations, oblivious to the peculiarities of the hotel. I took my seat by the window, stealing glances toward the hallway that led to that enigmatic door. After breakfast, I decided to explore. I wandered the halls, noting the ornate decorations and the flickering lights that cast unsettling shadows. Each corner I turned brought me closer to room number 13, the mystery growing heavier in the air. As I reached the door, I hesitated. A wave of unease washed over me, but I brushed it aside. I placed my hand on the cold doorknob and twisted. The door creaked open, revealing darkness beyond. The room was empty, devoid of any furnishings. Dust danced in the shafts of light that streamed through a small window, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. I stepped inside, my heart racing. The air felt thick, charged with a presence that sent shivers down my spine. I scanned the room, looking for anything that might explain its existence. As I moved toward the window, something caught my eye, a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. It seemed out of place in the otherwise barren room, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, and I jumped, spinning around. My breath quickened as I rattled the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged within me as I realized I was trapped. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling around me like a tempest. I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding in my ears, desperately trying to make sense of what was happening. What was this room, and why was I drawn to it? Then, as if answering my unspoken question, the mirror began to shimmer, reflecting not just my terrified face, but something else, shadows flitting at the edges, twisting and writhing as though they were alive. I felt a cold breath against my neck, and dread seeped into my bones. I had to escape. I pressed against the door, feeling the wood splinter against my palms as I pounded for someone to hear me. The whispers grew louder, an unintelligible murmur echoing around me. My heart raced, each thump a reminder of my vulnerability. I could hear the soft rustle of fabric, the scuttling of something unseen, and the chilling realization washed over me I was not alone. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" Silence followed, thick and suffocating. I gripped the doorknob again, twisting and pulling with all my strength. It felt as if the room itself were pushing back against me, a malevolent force keeping me contained. Finally, with a desperate heave, I turned and ran to the window. It was barred, but a glimmer of hope sparked within me. I could break it. I raised my fist, ready to smash the glass when the whispers transformed into something more distinct. Words began to form, threading through the air like a thread pulling me into a web. "Stay with us forever." My heart sank. The voices echoed in my mind, chilling me to my core. I stumbled back, falling into the cold embrace of the mirror. The reflection rippled, distorting my image. I pressed my hands against its surface, and to my horror, the glass felt warm and pulsing beneath my fingers, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. The fear that had been building within me erupted into panic. I turned back to the door, pounding frantically again. "Let me out. Please." The air in the room shifted. The whispers intensified, now rising to a cacophony of cries, laughter, and wails, blending into a maddening symphony of despair. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I was suffocating in this room, trapped in a nightmare. Just as I was about to give up, I heard footsteps outside the door, faint but distinct. "Hey, is someone in there?" It was a male voice, deep and resonant. I rushed to the door, relief flooding my veins. "Yes. Please, help me." The doorknob rattled, and the door creaked open, revealing a tall man with tousled dark hair and piercing green eyes. He looked startled, but quickly stepped in, surveying the barren room. "What happened?" "I thought I heard someone." "I got trapped," I gasped, relief flooding over me. "I don't know what's going on in here. There are whispers. I think this room is haunted." He raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched across his face. "Haunted? Are you serious?" "It's just an old storage room." "No. You don't understand." I pleaded, pointing at the mirror. "Look." He stepped closer, his expression shifting as he gazed into the mirror. "What is that?" he murmured, his voice trailing off. I followed his gaze, and my heart dropped. The reflection was no longer just mine. It now showed a multitude of faces twisted in agony, their mouths moving soundlessly, trying to communicate something I couldn't grasp. I stumbled back, pressing against the wall as dread washed over me. "This isn't right," I whispered. "We have to get out of here." The man, who introduced himself as Mark, nodded, his face pale. "You're right. Let's get out." He turned back to the door, but it slammed shut again, as if it had a mind of its own. "Why is it locked?" he shouted, rattling the knob. It doesn't make sense, I cried, panic bubbling within me again. We were just. Before I could finish, the whispers transformed into a single voice, clear and chilling. You cannot leave. You belong to us now. Mark and I exchanged terrified glances, our breath hitching as shadows began to seep into the room from the corners, creeping along the walls like dark tendrils. I had never felt such despair, such overwhelming hopelessness. Stay close, Mark shouted, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. The shadows coiled closer, and the temperature in the room plummeted. We have to break the mirror, I yelled, grabbing a nearby wooden chair and swinging it at the glass. The chair shattered, and shards flew everywhere, but the mirror remained intact, glowing ominously. Look out! Mark shouted as one of the shadows lunged toward me. I ducked just in time, feeling the icy breath graze my neck. I can't do this, I gasped, panic threatening to overwhelm me. Focus, he shouted, desperation edging his voice. We need to find a way to break this hold. With a fierce determination ignited in my chest, I grabbed the largest shard of the broken chair and faced the mirror. I had to do this. I had to break the spell that bound us to this cursed room. The whispers swelled, rising to a crescendo as I plunged the shard into the mirror. The glass shattered with a deafening roar, sending shards flying like fireworks. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, a surge of energy erupted from the mirror, knocking us both off our feet. I landed hard on the floor, the world spinning around me. Shadows twisted and writhed, pulling back as if repelled by the destruction of their source. Mark reached for me, pulling me up. We need to go. Now! We dashed for the door, and this time, it swung open as if welcoming us back to freedom. We stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air, the oppressive weight of room number 13 lifting as we escaped its clutches. But as we turned to run down the hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking behind us, waiting for the right moment to strike. We burst out of room number 13, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The hallway felt unnaturally silent, as if the very air held its breath in fear. I glanced back at the door, half expecting it to slam shut behind us, but it remained ajar, revealing only darkness within. What the hell was that? Mark said, running a hand through his hair, his eyes wide with disbelief. I don't know, I stammered, trying to steady my racing heart. But we have to get out of here. That place, it's not just a room, it's a trap. Let's find the manager. Maybe they know something about it, Mark suggested, leading the way down the hall. As we hurried toward the lobby, I felt a chill in the air, the weight of unseen eyes following us. Shadows danced along the walls, teasing my peripheral vision, but when I turned to look, they vanished. It was as if the hotel itself was alive, breathing, watching. We reached the lobby, but the receptionist was gone. The large clock above the front desk ticked ominously, its hands frozen at exactly 3 o'clock. Where is everyone? I muttered, unease creeping back into my mind. Maybe we should check the back office, Mark said, glancing around. There has to be someone here. We made our way behind the desk, pushing open a door marked staff only. The room was dimly lit and cluttered, filled with stacks of paperwork and old equipment. In the corner sat a small desk with a computer, its screen flickering. Do you see anything useful? I asked, rifling through a stack of papers. Not really, he replied, his brow furrowed. Just some maintenance records and guest logs. Wait, what's this? He held up a folder, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. It looks like an old history of the hotel. He opened it, scanning the pages quickly. What does it say? I pressed, my heart racing. Mark's expression darkened. This place has a dark history. Apparently, a lot of guests have gone missing over the years, and room number 13 has been mentioned multiple times. They say it's cursed. Cursed? I echoed, a chill running down my spine. What do you mean? There are accounts of people entering that room and never coming out. Others report hearing voices, feeling watched, or experiencing nightmares. It's like the room preys on your fears. The shadows in the room seem to grow thicker, creeping closer, as if they fed off the fear we were feeling. Then we have to get out, I said, my voice shaking. We can't stay here. It's not safe. Mark nodded, and we turned to leave the office. As we stepped back into the hallway, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, and the flickering lights overhead began to dim, plunging us into near darkness. Something's wrong, Mark whispered, his voice low. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the hall, reverberating off the walls. I jumped, adrenaline surging through me. What was that? I don't know, Mark replied, scanning the area. But we should. Before he could finish, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman with long, dark hair that hung over her face. She stepped forward, her clothes tattered and dirty, her eyes hollow and vacant. Help me, she croaked, her voice a mere whisper. My stomach twisted in fear as I took a step back. Who are you? She reached out toward us, her fingers trembling. Please. I need to get out of here. They won't let me leave. What do you mean? Mark asked, his voice firm yet cautious. They take you, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Once you enter room number 13, you become part of it. You can't escape. I glanced at Mark, terror gripping me. What do we do? The woman's expression changed suddenly, her eyes flashing with something akin to desperation. You have to find the truth. There's a way to break the curse, but you must face it. The mirror holds the key. Break the curse? I repeated, my mind racing. How? But before she could answer, her body convulsed, and she let out a blood-curdling scream. The shadows surged around her, pulling her back into the darkness. I reached out, but it was too late. She vanished as if she had never been there. Mark, I shouted, grabbing his arm. We need to go. Now. We sprinted down the hallway, the oppressive shadows clawing at our heels. I could feel their cold breath on my neck, and fear surged through me like a tidal wave. We rounded a corner and collided with another door, bursting into a room filled with old furniture draped in dusty sheets. What is this place? Mark panted, scanning the dimly lit room. Some kind of storage? I guessed, but I didn't care. We needed to find a way out. We pushed through the clutter, searching for a window or another exit. But as we moved deeper into the room, a low growl echoed through the darkness. The shadows coalesced, forming a mass in the corner, eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Run! I screamed, grabbing Mark's hand as we darted toward the door. But as we reached it, it slammed shut, trapping us inside. The growl grew louder, vibrating through my bones. The shadows lunged forward, swirling around us like a storm, and I could hear the whispers again, more insistent this time. Stay with us, forever. Mark. We can't give in. I shouted, forcing my mind to focus. We have to face it. We need to find the mirror. He nodded, determination etched on his face. Then let's do it. Let's find that room. We fought our way through the chaos, dodging the encroaching shadows as they reached for us, their icy fingers grazing my skin. Together, we barreled through the room, desperately searching for a way back to room number 13, our only chance at uncovering the truth and breaking the curse. We burst back into the hallway, the shadows swirling behind us, their whispers growing louder, more frantic. I could feel the cold tendrils of darkness trailing just inches from my skin, threatening to drag me back into the depths of despair. Mark and I sprinted, fueled by adrenaline and sheer will, searching for the ominous door that had ensnared us moments ago. There! Down the hall! Mark shouted, pointing to a flickering light. It illuminated a door at the end of the corridor, room number 13. My heart raced as we closed in on it, the weight of dread settling over me like a heavy cloak. As we reached the door, the atmosphere shifted, the temperature dropped, and the whispers morphed into a cacophony of laughter and despair. The door seemed to pulse, vibrating with an energy that was both enticing and terrifying. "Are you ready?" Mark asked, his voice steady despite the fear glinting in his eyes. I nodded, swallowing hard. We have to go in. It's the only way. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, echoing through the hallway, and we stepped inside, the darkness enveloping us. The room was unchanged, still empty, the cracked mirror hanging ominously on the wall, reflecting our terrified faces. "Where do we start?" Mark whispered, scanning the barren room. I stepped closer to the mirror, drawn to its shimmering surface. "The woman," she said, "the mirror holds the key." As I examined it, the air around us thickened, charged with an electric energy that crackled and sparked. I leaned closer, my reflection warping and twisting as I peered into the glass. Suddenly, the mirror darkened, and I saw a scene unfold, a glimpse of the past. Visions flickered before me, guests entering the room, laughter turning to screams, faces contorted in terror. I recoiled, my heart racing. They were all trapped here, like us. Mark leaned closer, his eyes wide. "What do we do? How do we stop this?" The whispers escalated, drowning out my thoughts. "Join us, be one of us," they taunted, their voices mingling in a sinister melody. I pressed my palms against the mirror, willing it to reveal more. "Show us how to break this," I shouted, frustration bubbling within me. The mirror rippled, and suddenly, I felt a sharp pain shoot through my head. Visions exploded in my mind, images of an incantation, a way to reverse the curse. "Mark, I see something. We have to chant these words." "What words?" he asked urgently, stepping closer. I took a breath, focusing on the images swirling in my mind. "I don't know if I can remember all of it, but we need to channel our fear, our pain, and push it back into the mirror." "Then let's do it." We faced the mirror, our hearts pounding in unison. "We'll face our fears together," Mark said, determination igniting in his voice. "On 3, I said, gripping his hand. 1, 2, 3. We began to chant the incantation I had glimpsed, our voices rising above the chaotic whispers. "Shadows, retreat. We reclaim our light. Fear be gone, return to the night." The mirror trembled, and the shadows surrounding us roared in anger. I could feel the energy shifting, pulling away from us as we chanted. The temperature dropped further, and the whispers turned into screams, echoing through the room. "Don't stop!" Mark shouted, squeezing my hand tighter. As we repeated the incantation, the mirror began to crack, spiderweb-like fissures spreading across its surface. The shadows writhed, fighting against the energy we were pushing toward the mirror. "We can do this," I cried out, drawing from every ounce of courage within me. The room trembled, and the shadows seemed to scream in defiance. "You will not escape. You are ours." "No!" I shouted, my voice filled with defiance. "We will break this curse." With one final shout, we pushed our energy into the mirror, and it shattered spectacularly, sending shards flying everywhere. The shadows howled in rage, their forms dissipating like smoke as the light began to flood the room. A blinding light enveloped us, and for a moment I felt weightless, as if I were being pulled into a different realm. I squeezed my eyes shut, embracing the warmth of the light as it engulfed me. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in the hotel lobby, gasping for breath, Mark beside me. The clock above the front desk ticked steadily, the time unchanged. The receptionist stood there, her face serene, as if nothing had happened. Did we escape?" I whispered, disbelief flooding through me. Mark looked around, confusion etched on his face. "I think so. But the memories, they're still there." The hotel felt different now, lighter somehow, but a lingering unease remained. We had escaped room number 13, but at what cost? The haunting whispers still echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the darkness we had faced. "We should leave," I said, looking at the entrance. "Before it comes back." "Agreed," Mark replied, his voice steady. "Let's get out of here." As we stepped outside, the sun greeted us with its warm embrace. The shadows receded, and the air felt clear, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't escaped entirely. The hotel behind us stood silent, a monument to the terror we had faced. But as we walked away, I caught a glimpse of the window in room number 13. The cracked mirror had been replaced with a blank wall, but in that brief moment, I swore I saw a flicker of movement, a face staring back at me, a promise that the darkness was still watching. We stumbled out of the hotel, hearts still racing as we reached the safety of the sunlit street. The vibrant colors of the day felt surreal against the darkness we had just escaped. It was hard to believe we had faced something so malevolent just moments before. "Are we really free?" Mark asked, looking back at the ominous building. "I mean, do you think it's over?" I hesitated, the doubt gnawing at me. "I don't know. I still feel off. Like the hotel is still somehow connected to us." "Let's just get as far away from here as we can," he replied, and I nodded in agreement. We walked in silence, the bustling sounds of the town enveloping us as we tried to shake off the lingering unease. The sun hung high, casting a bright light that should have felt comforting, but instead, it made the shadows stretch in unsettling ways. When we reached my car, I hesitated before unlocking the door. What if it follows us? What if we're still part of its curse? Mark placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We faced it together. We broke the mirror. It has to be over. Taking a deep breath, I nodded and climbed into the car, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the hotel looming behind us. But it was just a fading silhouette, swallowed by the bright landscape. The drive home was filled with silence, the weight of our experience hanging heavily in the air. Mark occasionally stole glances at me, as if he were trying to gauge my thoughts. I was too busy wrestling with my own fears to speak. When we finally reached my apartment, a sense of normalcy washed over me, but it felt false. The everyday sights, the familiar streets, the sounds of the city were suddenly tinged with a haunting reminder of the hotel. "Want to grab some food?" Mark offered, breaking the silence as we stepped inside. I nodded absently, but as we settled into my living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't safe yet. It was as if room number 13 had left a part of itself behind, lurking just out of sight. "Let's watch something," Mark suggested, trying to lighten the mood. "How about a comedy?" I agreed, hoping distraction would ease my mind. But as we flipped through channels, I found myself unable to focus on the screen. The laughter echoed hollowly in my ears, mingling with the whispers I thought I had left behind. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. It seemed off, somehow distorted. My heart raced as I realized the light behind me flickered ominously, like a candle about to go out. "Mark, do you see that?" I asked, pointing. He turned to look but found nothing. "See what?" "It's just the lights." I shook my head, feeling a chill run down my spine. "No, there was someone. Maybe you just need to rest," he suggested gently. "It's been a long day." "Yeah, maybe," I murmured, but I knew that wasn't it. As night enveloped the city, the atmosphere grew thicker and the shadows deepened. I could feel them creeping back in, curling around the edges of my mind. I tried to shake it off, but the sensation was unshakable. Later that night, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. Every creak of the apartment felt amplified, every shadow seemed to twist and turn with a life of its own. I recalled the woman's desperate plea, the laughter of the shadows, and the haunting whispers that had filled room number 13. I rolled over, glancing at Mark, who had fallen asleep on the couch. His face was peaceful, but I couldn't join him in that state. I was wide awake, the weight of my fears pressing down on me. In a moment of impulse, I crept out of bed and grabbed my phone. I began to research the hotel, desperate for answers. The first few results were mundane, listing it as a historic landmark. But as I dug deeper, I found forums filled with stories from other guests who had experienced strange occurrences, feelings of dread, and even nightmares after their stays. I couldn't help but feel a chill wash over me. It wasn't just us. The hotel was a nexus of fear, a portal to something darker. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "You can never escape." My blood ran cold, and I felt the room close in around me. I jumped, the words echoing in my mind like a death knell. I looked around, the shadows feeling like they were creeping closer, almost sentient. I rushed to Mark, shaking him awake. "Mark, wake up." He blinked, disoriented. "What? What's wrong?" "It's the hotel. I got a message, something's wrong." "What do you mean?" He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "It said, you can never escape." As I spoke, the lights flickered violently, plunging us into darkness for a split second. The air grew thick, and I could hear whispers swirling around us, echoing our fears. "Join us," they hissed. "Get the light," Mark shouted, scrambling to his feet. I fumbled for my phone, the screen illuminating our surroundings, revealing the shadows twisting into grotesque shapes. "We have to leave. We have to." The front door burst open, a gust of wind swirling through the room, extinguishing my phone's light. The shadows coalesced, thickening around us, drowning out our voices. No! I screamed, but the words were lost in the chaos. We stumbled back, desperately trying to find our way through the darkness. Mark, we have to face it again. The mirror. I shouted, trying to remember what we had done before. Where is it? He yelled, panic lacing his voice. As if in response, a light flickered back on, revealing the reflection of the shattered mirror hovering in the air, floating like a portal. It shimmered ominously, the surface swirling with darkness and light. Together! I shouted, taking Mark's hand as we stepped closer. We can't let it take us again. We faced the mirror, the shadows writhing around us, reaching for our throats. This time, we won't be afraid. As we began to chant again, the whispers grew louder, drowning out our words. Join us, they screamed, clawing our minds. But we pushed back, channeling our fear and anger into the mirror. We are not yours. We break this curse. The mirror vibrated violently, cracks spreading across its surface like lightning. You cannot escape your fate, the shadows howled, their anger palpable. With one last effort, we shouted, Fear be gone, return to the night. The mirror shattered again, and a blinding light erupted, engulfing us. This time, there was no weightlessness, no moment of uncertainty. As the light faded, we found ourselves standing in the same apartment, the shadows dissipated, leaving only silence behind. The air felt clear, and I held my breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But as I glanced around, I noticed something strange. The room was untouched, but a single shard of the mirror lay on the floor, glinting in the light, a silent reminder of what we had faced. I picked it up, staring into my reflection, and for a fleeting moment, I saw her, the woman from the hotel, her eyes wide with desperation, pleading for help. Mark, look! I gasped, pointing at the shard. He stepped closer, his eyes widening. What does this mean? I don't know, I whispered, terror creeping back in. But I think it's not over. And as we stood there, the shard still reflecting the dark depths of the hotel, I felt the shadows lurking just beyond our perception, waiting patiently for the next chance to strike. The otherworldly touch. Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when you were alone? It is a feeling that creeps up your spine, a whisper in your ear that something isn't right. I never paid much attention to those feelings until I met her, the woman who would turn my world upside down. It started on an ordinary evening. I had just returned home after a long day at work. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the neighborhood. As I stepped through the front door, I shrugged off the day's weariness. I made my way to the kitchen, the familiar smell of coffee wafting through the air. It was my ritual, brew a cup, sit down, and take a moment to unwind before the chaos of the evening began. As I waited for the coffee to finish brewing, I glanced out of the window, where the last light of day was being swallowed by darkness. That's when I saw her, standing across the street, in front of an old, crumbling house. She wore a flowing dress that seemed to shimmer in the fading light, her long hair cascading down her back. There was something captivating about her, an ethereal quality that pulled me in. But even from a distance, I could sense a chill in the air. I shook my head, dismissing the unsettling feeling in my gut. Maybe I was just tired. I poured my coffee, took a sip, and returned to the window. She was still there, now gazing directly at me. I felt my heart race as our eyes locked for what felt like an eternity. There was an intensity in her gaze that sent a shiver down my spine. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the night. I couldn't shake the image of her from my mind. Who was she? Why had she been standing there? I tried to convince myself that I was just overthinking it. But the feeling of unease lingered, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. I replayed the scene over and over in my head. I thought about the woman, her beauty, and the strange energy that surrounded her. I tried to shake it off, but each time I closed my eyes, I could see her face. There was a whisper in my mind, a warning that I couldn't ignore. In the days that followed, I tried to forget about her. I went about my routine, burying myself in work and socializing with friends. Yet, every time I glanced out my window, I half expected to see her standing there again, waiting for me. And then, one afternoon, as I returned home from work, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something compelled me to look through the peephole before opening the door. My heart dropped. There she was, just a few feet away, her back turned to me. I was frozen in place, unable to move or breathe. What was she doing here? How had she found me? I held my breath, hoping she would just go away. But then, as if sensing my presence, she turned slowly. Our eyes met once more. Her lips curled into a smile that sent chills racing through me. I was caught in her gaze, trapped in a web of confusion and fear. Without thinking, I stepped back, retreating deeper into my home. I watched her through the window, my heart pounding in my chest. She stood there, unmoving, her smile fading into an expression I couldn't quite decipher. As the minutes stretched on, I felt a strange pull, an inexplicable urge to open the door and confront her. But something deep within me screamed to stay away. I was paralyzed by a fear that felt all too real, an instinct to run. Eventually, I gathered the courage to reach for my phone, dialing a friend. I needed to talk to someone, to shake this off. But as I spoke, I couldn't help but glance back at the window. She was gone. But that was only the beginning. The next few days were a blur of confusion and fear. I kept expecting her to return, but as the sun rose and set, my paranoia began to ebb. Maybe it was just a strange coincidence, I thought. Perhaps she had just been a passerby, a fleeting moment in my mundane life. Then, one evening, as I was preparing for bed, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in my bathroom mirror. She stood behind me, her once beautiful face twisted into something grotesque and haunting. I turned quickly, heart racing, but there was nothing there, just the empty bathroom, the faint sound of my own breathing echoing in the silence. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming for me. I felt trapped in a waking nightmare, each sound amplified in the darkness, each shadow stretching unnaturally across my walls. I knew then that I was not just dealing with an unsettling encounter. I was in the midst of something far more sinister, something that was only just beginning to unveil itself. As the days turned into weeks, my life slipped into a disorienting routine. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, convinced that she would appear at any moment. Every time I opened a door, glanced at a mirror, or stepped into a shadowed corner of my home, my heart raced with the anticipation of seeing her again. The normalcy of my life was shattered, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. At work, I found it increasingly difficult to focus. My colleagues noticed my distraction, throwing concerned glances my way. "You look tired," one of them remarked during a meeting, her brow furrowed in concern. I forced a smile, waving off her concern. "Just a rough week," I said, but the truth was far more complex. That night, I decided to distract myself by inviting a friend over. As we settled into the living room, laughter echoed through the space, a welcome reprieve from the oppressive silence that had become my constant companion. We chatted about trivial matters, but deep down, I remained on edge, waiting for the moment when my friend would leave and I would be alone again. As she prepared to leave, I felt a sudden surge of panic. "Are you sure you don't want to stay a bit longer?" I asked, my voice betraying my anxiety. She raised an eyebrow, concern evident in her expression. "You're acting strange. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, debating whether to share the bizarre occurrences that had plagued me. But just as I was about to open up, a sudden chill swept through the room, causing me to shiver involuntarily. I glanced at the window, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw her silhouette standing outside, watching us. "I think I just need some fresh air," I said quickly, eager to dismiss my fear. My friend nodded, giving me a reassuring pat on the shoulder before heading out. Alone once more, I stood by the window, peering into the darkness. Nothing. But my relief was short-lived. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from the bathroom. My heart raced as I lay still, straining to listen. It was soft, almost like fingernails scratching against the surface. I knew I should ignore it, should convince myself it was just the house settling or the wind. But something deep inside urged me to investigate. I took a deep breath, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. The cold floor sent a shock through my body, and I paused, willing myself to move. With each cautious step toward the bathroom, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The tapping continued, a rhythmic insistence that sent shivers down my spine. When I reached the bathroom door, I hesitated, pressing my ear against the cold wood. The sound had stopped. I waited, holding my breath, and finally pushed the door open, expecting to see her standing there, grinning at me with that twisted smile. But the bathroom was empty. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in the silence. I flicked on the light, scanning the room, half expecting her to jump out at me from behind the shower curtain. But there was nothing, just the mundane reality of my bathroom. I took a step back, feeling foolish for letting my imagination run wild. Maybe I had just been dreaming. I turned to leave when I caught my reflection in the mirror. My heart dropped. There she was, her figure lurking just behind me, her long hair obscuring her face, her body shrouded in darkness. I spun around, but again, there was nothing there. I staggered backward, gripping the sink for support. My breath came in shallow gasps, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. I stumbled out of the bathroom, closing the door behind me as if I could somehow keep her away. I leaned against the wall, my thoughts spiraling into chaos. What was happening to me? The next morning, I decided to take action. I needed to confront my fear, to understand what was happening. I began researching strange occurrences, hauntings, and otherworldly experiences, hoping to find some explanation for the terror that had invaded my life. Hours turned into days as I immersed myself in articles, forums, and personal accounts. The more I read, the more I began to question my own sanity. Many of the stories mirrored my own experiences, visions of figures appearing unexpectedly, the sensation of being watched, and the creeping dread that something was terribly wrong. But as much as I sought answers, the knowledge did little to ease my fear. Instead, it fueled it. One evening, as I browsed an online forum, I stumbled upon a post that caught my eye. A woman shared her experience with a spirit that had become fixated on her after a chance encounter. The more she ignored it, the more aggressive it became. She described how it would appear in mirrors, lurking in the corners of her home, waiting for her to acknowledge its presence. My stomach twisted as I read her words. Could this be happening to me? Desperate to rid myself of this nightmare, I resolved to confront her. I would find a way to face whatever this was, to demand it leave me alone. I spent hours contemplating how to do it, writing out what I would say. The following night, as darkness fell, I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom, my heart racing. "I know you're there," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't know what you want, but I'm not afraid of you anymore." The reflection stared back at me, still and silent. I waited, my pulse pounding in my ears, but there was no response. Just as I thought I was being foolish, I felt a cold breeze wash over me, chilling my skin. My heart raced as I felt the familiar sensation, the prickling at the back of my neck, the instinctual awareness that I was not alone. And then, there she was, appearing beside me in the mirror, her once beautiful face now transformed into something horrific. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale and mottled. I recoiled in terror, the air around me thick with an unexplainable presence. "Leave me alone," I screamed, my voice echoing off the walls. But her lips curled into that familiar smile, a chilling contrast to the horror that filled her eyes. I stumbled back, gasping for air, my mind racing. She was here, and I had unwittingly opened the door to her presence. I turned and fled, heart pounding as I ran into my bedroom. I collapsed onto my bed, pulling the covers over my head, desperately wishing for morning to come. But I knew deep down that this wasn't over. Morning arrived, but it brought no relief. The sunlight spilled through the window, illuminating the room, yet I felt a weight pressing down on me. I tried to convince myself it was all just a nightmare, a figment of my imagination, but the vivid memories lingered, haunting my thoughts. I had confronted her, and now I was trapped in this waking nightmare. As I got ready for work, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see her lurking in the shadows. The mundane task of brushing my teeth felt surreal, as if I were trapped in a dream. Each splash of water echoed too loudly, each movement felt exaggerated, and the reflection in the mirror seemed almost foreign. When I arrived at the office, my colleagues greeted me with smiles, but I could barely focus on their small talk. My mind was consumed by the horrifying encounter. I forced myself to engage, nodding along as they spoke, but inside, I was a mess of anxiety and dread. During lunch, I confided in my closest friend, Sarah, who had always been a good listener. As I recounted my strange experiences, her expression shifted from concern to skepticism. "You know, sometimes our minds can play tricks on us, especially when we're stressed," she said gently. "Have you thought about talking to someone? A therapist, maybe?" I considered her suggestion, but I knew this was more than just stress. There was something undeniably sinister about my encounters. "I know it sounds crazy," I admitted, "but it feels real. I saw her, Sarah. I know what I saw." That evening, I returned home, my heart heavy with the weight of my experiences. As I prepared dinner, I found myself glancing toward the bathroom mirror, half expecting her to appear. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension that had become my constant companion. I tried to distract myself by watching television, but the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and writhe, feeding my growing paranoia. Each flickering light cast unsettling shapes that danced across the walls. The night dragged on, the mundane ticking of the clock amplifying the silence. As I turned off the TV and prepared for bed, I noticed a small flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. I turned to look, but there was nothing there. I felt the chill seep into my bones, and dread washed over me. The fear of facing her again paralyzed me, and I forced myself to climb under the covers, willing sleep to come. But as I lay there, sleep refused to find me. It was then I heard it, the faint tapping sound that had haunted me before. It came from the bathroom, echoing through the stillness of the night. My heart raced as I listened, trying to convince myself it was just the house settling. But deep down, I knew. I lay there, frozen in fear, each heartbeat echoing in my ears. Gathering every ounce of courage, I quietly slipped out of bed and padded toward the bathroom. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, each sound reverberating through my chest. I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling. I turned it slowly, the door creaking as I pushed it open. The bathroom light flickered, casting eerie shadows against the walls. My breath hitched as I peered inside, half expecting her to leap out at me. But it was empty. I stepped inside, the chill of the tiles sending a shiver through me. The tapping had stopped. I glanced at the mirror, half afraid of what I might see, but there was nothing, just my own reflection staring back at me, wide-eyed and terrified. I turned to leave, feeling foolish for letting my fear dictate my actions. But as I turned off the light and stepped into the hallway, I felt a cold breath against my neck, and I froze. "Leave me alone," I whispered, barely able to breathe. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. Panic surged through me as I stumbled back to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I leaned against it, my heart racing, desperately trying to calm myself. I was on the verge of losing my mind. In a moment of desperation, I reached for my phone and opened a search engine, typing in how to get rid of a spirit. I scrolled through various articles, each one more terrifying than the last, detailing experiences of those who had been haunted. I found recommendations for cleansing rituals, protective charms, and even advice to confront the spirit directly. It felt absurd, but I was willing to try anything. I spent hours researching, making notes on what I could do to rid myself of her presence. I gathered supplies, sage for cleansing, salt for protection, and a small crystal I had once found at a flea market, hoping it might offer some shield against whatever was tormenting me. The following night, I decided to perform a cleansing ritual in my home. I lit the sage, allowing the smoke to swirl around me, filling the space with its earthy scent. As I moved from room to room, I spoke words of protection, my voice shaking but determined. "Leave this place. You are not welcome here," I chanted, my heart racing with each step. I moved to the bathroom last, the one room where my fear had manifested most intensely. The air felt heavy, charged with an unsettling energy. I lit a candle and placed it on the sink, watching the flame flicker as I waved the sage around the room. But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror. My heart dropped as I saw her reflection, her face twisted in rage, her eyes dark and hollow. The candle flickered violently, and I felt a rush of cold air sweep through the room. "Why won't you leave?" I screamed, my voice breaking. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. The candle's flame sputtered, barely illuminating her ghastly figure. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, tripping over the bathroom rug. In that moment, I realized that my attempts to rid myself of her presence had only made things worse. I was trapped, ensnared in a web of fear and desperation. I scrambled to my feet and ran out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind me. I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, my mind racing. What was she? Why had she chosen me? As I sat on the floor, enveloped in shadows, I felt the weight of despair settling over me. I had opened a door I couldn't close, and I feared what lay ahead. The shadows in my home deepened, wrapping around me like a shroud, as I realized that my struggle was only beginning. I spent the following days in a state of heightened anxiety, my senses on overdrive. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of the wind outside felt amplified, the normal sounds of my home now tinged with a sinister undertone. I barely left my apartment, convinced that the moment I stepped outside, she would be waiting for me, lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce. I returned to work, but my colleagues' chatter felt distant, as if I were observing life through a thick glass barrier. I forced myself to engage, to smile, and to nod, but the conversations washed over me like a distant tide. I felt disconnected from everyone and everything, trapped in my own private hell. That evening, I decided to reach out to Sarah again, hoping that talking might ground me, might remind me that I wasn't completely alone in this battle. We arranged to meet at a small cafe near my apartment. As I walked there, the streets felt different, darker, somehow, the lamplights casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the pavement. When I entered the cafe, the warm light enveloped me, providing a stark contrast to the coldness I had been feeling. Sarah was already seated at a corner table, her expression brightening when she saw me. "Hey, there you are," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "Sorry I'm late," I mumbled, sliding into the chair opposite her. "Are you okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "You look a bit frazzled." I sighed, my heart heavy. "I'm not sure how to explain it," I began, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. "It's like I'm being haunted, Sarah. I see her everywhere." "Who?" "The woman you told me about," she asked, her voice low and steady. I nodded, feeling the weight of my experiences pressing down on me. I tried to get rid of her. I did this whole cleansing ritual, but it only made things worse. As I spoke, I watched Sarah's expression shift from concern to a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. "What exactly did you see?" she asked, leaning closer. I hesitated, unsure how to convey the depth of my fear. I saw her in the mirror, and the last time, she looked different. Like something was wrong with her. Her face was twisted, and her eyes were hollow. I can't shake the feeling that she's angry. "What do you think she wants?" Sarah asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it feels like she's trying to communicate something, and I'm terrified of what that could be." We talked late into the night, the cafe buzzing around us, but for me, it was as if we were in our own world. Sarah suggested I try writing down my experiences, that it might help me process everything. "Sometimes, getting it out can make things feel less overwhelming," she said. When I returned home that night, I felt a slight sense of relief after sharing my burden. But as I sat at my desk, the blank page stared back at me, daring me to write. I picked up my pen, hesitating, unsure of where to start. Finally, I began jotting down the details of my encounters, trying to put my feelings into words. But with each stroke of the pen, the room grew darker, the shadows creeping in closer. I glanced toward the bathroom door, half expecting to see her standing there, waiting. My heart raced, and I forced myself to concentrate on the page, determined to push through the fear. Hours passed, and the words flowed more freely as I poured my heart onto the page. I wrote about my first encounter, the unsettling feeling that had followed me ever since, and the terror of seeing her in the mirror. But as I finished, I felt a chill sweep through the room, causing the hair on the back of my neck to stand on end. I paused, my breath catching in my throat. A sound echoed from the bathroom, a soft whispering that seemed to beckon me closer. Heart pounding, I stood up, the pen slipping from my fingers and clattering to the floor. I approached the bathroom, my pulse racing with every step. The door creaked open, and the flickering light illuminated the space, revealing nothing but emptiness. But I knew better. I stepped inside, my heart racing. The air felt charged, thick with an unnameable presence. I turned to the mirror, and for a brief moment, I thought I could see her again, just a fleeting shadow at the edge of my vision. I squinted, trying to focus, but it vanished, leaving me staring at my own frightened reflection. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice echoing against the tiled walls. But there was only silence, the bathroom heavy with anticipation. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me, mingling with fear. I was tired of running, tired of living in a constant state of terror. I took a step closer to the mirror, my hands trembling. "If you want to talk, then talk," I challenged, my voice firm despite the shaking in my limbs. And then it happened. The lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for the switch, panic gripping me. The moment the light returned, there she stood, not in the reflection, but beside me, her presence cold and suffocating. I froze, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. She was no longer the beautiful stranger from our first encounter. Instead, she appeared emaciated, her skin hanging loosely, her eyes sunken deep into her skull. A chilling smile spread across her face, revealing teeth that seemed far too long. "Why do you fear me?" she asked, her voice a rasping whisper that sent chills down my spine. My throat went dry, words failing me as I stepped back, horrified. "What do you want?" I managed to stammer, my voice trembling. Her smile widened, revealing a glimpse of something dark and unfathomable. "I need you to remember," she said, her voice echoing around the room, the air thickening with her words. "Remember what?" I asked, my breath hitching in my throat. "Your past," she whispered, and in that moment, the world around me blurred, memories flooding back like a tidal wave. Images of my childhood, of laughter and joy, but intertwined with shadows, things I had buried deep within me, fears I thought I had escaped. Suddenly, I was overwhelmed by sensations, my heart racing, the taste of salt on my lips, the feeling of loss that clung to me like a heavy shroud. The shadows danced in the corners of my mind, and I understood that she was not just a specter haunting me, she was a reminder of something I had tried to forget. I stumbled back, grappling with the flood of emotions, realizing that my fears were intertwined with my past, a past that I couldn't run from any longer. In that instant, everything shifted. The bathroom faded away, the walls closing in as I was engulfed in darkness. I felt her presence, an omnipresent force drawing me deeper into the shadows of my own mind. "Face it," she urged, her voice echoing in the void. "You must confront your fears to be free." And with those words, I felt myself being pulled, spiraling down into a darkness I could no longer escape. The darkness enveloped me, thick and suffocating, as I fell deeper into the void. Panic clotted my chest, but I couldn't find my breath. I was lost in a world where the past and present intertwined, where shadows twisted and morphed into memories that threatened to consume me. Suddenly, the void shattered like glass, and I was thrust into a familiar place, my childhood home. The air smelled of old wood and the faint scent of cinnamon, a comfort I hadn't felt in years. I stood in the hallway, the walls adorned with family photos that seemed to watch me, their gazes heavy with expectation. I glanced around, confusion setting in. Why was I here? Then, I heard it, the laughter of children echoing from the living room. It was my little brother, Tom, his voice bright and carefree. The memory struck me like a bolt of lightning, igniting a mix of nostalgia and sorrow. I stepped forward, compelled to find him, but the laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. As I entered the living room, the scene shifted. Tom was no longer a child. He stood before me, a shadow of his former self, haunted, eyes dull and lifeless. He looked right through me, his face a mask of sorrow and fear. "Why did you leave?" he whispered, the question hanging in the air like a specter. My heart ached at his words, steel crashing over me like a wave. "I had to go," I replied, my voice shaky. "I thought it was for the best." "But you abandoned us," he accused, his voice echoing with betrayal. "You turned your back when we needed you." I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. "I didn't know how to help. I was scared. I thought running away would protect you." The room twisted, morphing into a darkened version of my childhood. The walls closed in, painted with shadows that seemed to writhe in agony. I was trapped in a cycle of memories, each one darker than the last. "Face your fears," the woman's voice echoed, a chilling reminder of her presence. "You cannot escape what you have done." Suddenly, I was transported to another memory, my family gathered around the dinner table, laughter and warmth filling the air. But as I looked closer, I noticed the tension behind the smiles. My parents exchanged glances laden with unspoken worries, their laughter forced and hollow. "Mom, Dad, what's wrong?" I asked, confusion flooding my mind. "You're too young to understand," my mother replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "There are things we can't protect you from." My father's gaze shifted to the window, as if searching for answers in the darkness outside. "We're doing our best," he said quietly, but his words felt like a lie. The scene shifted again, and I found myself in the backyard. I watched as my brother played with our dog, the joy radiating from him like a beacon of innocence. But then, the joy was replaced by chaos, the dog barking wildly, Tom falling to the ground, the world spinning as darkness descended. "No! Tom!" I screamed, but my voice was lost in the storm of memories. Suddenly, I was back in the living room, the shadows coiling around me. "You left him," the woman hissed, her presence suffocating. "You left him to fend for himself." "I didn't know!" I cried, desperation clawing at my throat. "I thought it would keep him safe." Her laughter echoed, a chilling sound that reverberated through my bones. "Your fear blinded you. You thought you could escape, but you've only buried the truth. Face it, he needed you, and you abandoned him." The walls around me trembled, and I felt myself falling once more, deeper into the abyss. Memories flashed before my eyes, moments of laughter, of warmth, but each tinged with shadows of regret. I saw my family torn apart, the love that had once bound us unraveling into threads of despair. I clutched my head, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions. "Stop! Please!" I screamed, but the darkness only tightened its grip. "You cannot escape your past," the woman whispered, her voice laced with malice. "You must confront it to be free." The void shifted again, and I found myself in the hospital, sterile and cold. My heart raced as I looked around, dread curling in my stomach. I remembered this place all too well, the day I received the call that changed everything. "Tom is in trouble," my mother had said, her voice trembling. "You need to come home." I rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see my parents, their faces etched with fear and grief. The sterile lights flickered above, casting eerie shadows against the walls. I approached the waiting room, desperate to find out what had happened. But as I entered, I was met with a sight that would haunt me forever. Tom lay in a hospital bed, pale and lifeless. The beeping of machines filled the room, each sound like a dagger to my heart. "No!" I cried, rushing to his side. "Please, wake up. You have to wake up." But there was no response, only silence, a silence that echoed through my soul. I fell to my knees, the weight of guilt crushing me. I should have been there. I should have saved you. "Now you understand," the woman said, her voice a low growl that sent shivers down my spine. "You failed him when he needed you the most. You turned away, and now he's lost." The room faded again, and I found myself in a darkened alley, the scent of rain and despair heavy in the air. I could see Tom's ghostly figure standing at the end, his back turned to me. "Tom," I called, desperation filling my voice. "I'm sorry. I should have been there for you." He turned slowly, his eyes hollow and filled with sadness. "You let fear take you away," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You let it consume you." I reached out to him, but he began to fade, the darkness swallowing him whole. "No! Please!" I cried, my heart breaking as I watched him vanish. "You cannot escape the truth," the woman's voice echoed, wrapping around me like a shroud. "You must confront your fears to save him." I collapsed to my knees, the weight of my failures crashing over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't run anymore. I had to face the reality of my choices, the fear that had haunted me for so long. "I'm sorry, Tom," I sobbed, the words pouring from my heart. "I should have been there. I was scared, and I let you down." But as I spoke those words, a flicker of light broke through the darkness, illuminating the shadows around me. I felt warmth radiate from within, pushing against the cold that had gripped my heart. "Remember the love," the woman whispered, her voice softer now, almost tender. "Remember what you fought to protect." With each word, the darkness receded, and I felt a connection to Tom, a bond that could never be severed by fear or regret. I understood now that the shadows were a part of my past, but they didn't define me. "Tom," I called, my voice stronger now. "I'm here. I will always be here. I won't let fear take me away again." The shadows trembled, and I felt the weight lift. I could see the outline of Tom's figure reappear, a faint smile gracing his lips. "You found your way back," he said, his voice filled with warmth. And in that moment, I knew I could fight. I had to confront the darkness, not just for myself, but for him. As the shadows began to dissolve, I felt the woman's presence fade, leaving behind only a lingering echo of her voice. "Face your fears, and you will find the light." With renewed strength, I stood tall, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. I would not let fear dictate my life any longer. As the shadows dissipated, I felt a surge of hope, a flicker of light breaking through the darkness that had consumed me for so long. The memories of my brother lingered, but instead of drowning in despair, I felt a warmth radiating from within, a reminder that love could conquer even the deepest fears. The world around me shifted once again, and I found myself back in my apartment, the familiar surroundings grounding me. I could feel the weight of the memories still clinging to me, but now they were not shackles, they were lessons learned, scars that reminded me of my journey. I took a deep breath, the air feeling lighter, as if the very walls of my home were breathing with me. The woman, the specter of my fears, had revealed the truth. I had been running, hiding from my past, but I was ready to confront it now. I would no longer be a prisoner of my own mind. That night, Sleep eluded me. I sat at my desk, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the blank pages before me. I picked up my pen, determined to write my truth, to lay bare my fears and my regrets. Each word flowed freely as I poured my heart onto the page, unearthing memories I had buried deep. As I wrote, I felt a sense of catharsis, each stroke of the pen lifting the burden I had carried for so long. I wrote about my childhood, the moments of joy and sorrow, the love that had once filled our home, and the darkness that had seeped in after Tom's accident. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, a sense of dread began to creep in. The familiar feeling of being watched settled over me, a chilling reminder that the woman was still out there, lurking in the shadows. I shivered, glancing toward the hallway, half expecting to see her silhouette against the dim light. I forced myself to focus, determined not to let fear creep back in. "You're stronger than this," I whispered to myself, repeating the mantra as if it could chase away the encroaching darkness. "You can do this." But just as I was about to put the pen down, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. The familiar coldness seeped back in, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The atmosphere shifted, heavy with anticipation, as if the very air was holding its breath. "Are you ready to face me?" The woman's voice echoed from the darkness, a chilling reminder that she had not left me yet. My heart raced, a mix of fear and defiance surging within me. "I'm done running," I called out, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "I'm ready to confront whatever you are." As if summoned by my words, she materialized in the doorway, her form emerging from the shadows like a dark specter. The beauty I had first encountered was gone. Now, she was a grotesque version of herself, her eyes hollow and menacing, her smile twisted in a way that sent shivers down my spine. "Do you really think you can face me?" she hissed, stepping closer. "You're just a frightened child pretending to be strong." I took a step back, but forced myself to stand my ground. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. You're just a manifestation of my fears, and I refuse to let you control me." Her laughter echoed, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the very walls of my apartment. "Control? You think you can control anything? Your past haunts you. It will always haunt you." The shadows coiled around her, enhancing her menacing presence. But I clenched my fists, the resolve within me igniting a fire I hadn't felt in years. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've faced. I've lost too much to let you win." I reached for the mirror, the surface reflecting not just my image, but the remnants of my memories. "You want me to face my fears? Fine. But I won't do it alone. I'll carry my brother with me. The love we shared will be my strength." As I spoke, the atmosphere shifted, the shadows trembling in response to my words. The woman's expression faltered for a brief moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her twisted features. "You think love will protect you?" she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "Yes," I replied, my voice firm. "Love is stronger than fear. It's a light that can pierce through the darkest shadows." With that declaration, I stepped forward, defying the darkness that loomed over me. The shadows shrank back, revealing the light that radiated from within me. Memories of my brother flooded my mind, his laughter, his warmth, the bond we shared that even death could not sever. The woman recoiled, her form wavering as the light grew brighter. "No! This cannot be," she screamed, the shadows around her swirling violently, as if they were alive, fighting against the light. But I pressed on, the warmth enveloping me as I focused on Tom, on the love we had shared. "You have no power over me," I declared. "I choose to remember the love, the moments that made us who we are. "You're nothing but a reflection of my fears." As I spoke those words, the light intensified, breaking through the darkness. The woman writhed in agony, her twisted form cracking like glass, shards of darkness scattering around the room. "Tom," I called out, feeling his presence grow stronger beside me. "We're not afraid anymore. We're stronger together." With one final burst of energy, the darkness shattered, a blinding light consuming everything in its path. I felt the warmth of my brother envelop me, lifting me high above the shadows, breaking the chains that had bound me for so long. As the light faded, I found myself standing alone in my apartment, the oppressive atmosphere replaced by a sense of calm. I glanced around, the remnants of darkness gone, replaced by the soft glow of the morning sun streaming through the windows. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. The woman, the embodiment of my fears, was no more. I had faced my past, confronted my demons, and emerged victorious. But as I stood there, a new feeling washed over me, one of determination. I knew my journey wasn't over. I had to honor Tom's memory and the love we shared. I had to continue living, embracing the light, even in the face of darkness. With renewed strength, I picked up my pen once more, ready to write my truth, to share my story. And as I wrote, I knew that I would carry my brother with me, the love we had shared illuminating the path ahead. The Sea Eye. Have you ever stared into the depths of the ocean and wondered what secrets lie beneath its surface? The vastness of the sea has always intrigued me, its mysteries calling to those brave enough to venture beyond the shore. As the captain of the mariner's dream, I was one of those who heeded that call. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the deck while the salty breeze tugged at our sails. My crew and I were seasoned sailors, yet something that day felt different, an uneasy tension hung in the air. Our journey had started as a simple voyage across the open waters, but as we sailed deeper into the uncharted territory, I noticed the water beneath us shifting. It was a curious sight. Patches of luminescence flickered like fireflies dancing in the dark. My heart raced as I leaned over the ship's edge, trying to catch a glimpse of this strange phenomenon. "Captain, what do you see?" my first mate, Thomas, called out, his voice laced with curiosity. "Just the ocean playing tricks on us," I replied, though I could feel the unease settling in my chest like a heavy stone. "Keep a steady course." As night fell, the phosphorescent glow intensified. It wasn't just random flickers anymore, there was a pulsating rhythm to it, like a heartbeat echoing from the abyss. The crew whispered among themselves, their laughter turning nervous as the waves began to swell. I could sense their fear, mirroring my own. What was causing that light? Could it be a sign? The vastness of the ocean, once a comforting embrace, began to feel like an endless expanse of isolation. The deeper we sailed, the stronger the light became, a beacon pulling us towards the depths. I ordered the sails trimmed, but the ship seemed to move of its own accord, gliding towards that mesmerizing glow. "Captain," shouted Thomas, panic lacing his tone. "The ship, it won't listen." The mariner's dream groaned as if caught in an unseen current. I gripped the wheel, desperately trying to wrestle control. The wind howled around us, whipping through the rigging, and the sound of the waves crashing against the hull grew louder, more menacing. "Hold on!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the roar of the sea. The light below us throbbed, a seductive pulse that seemed to whisper promises of wonder and doom. My instinct screamed to turn back, but the pull was undeniable. As we surged closer, the ocean's surface shimmered, revealing shapes lurking just beneath. I leaned over the railing, peering into the dark waters, and what I saw sent a chill racing down my spine. Shadows twisted and writhed, their movements fluid and unnatural. "Get back," I ordered, but the crew had already gathered at the railing, entranced by the light. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. It was as if the glow had entranced them, drawing them toward the edge. I fought the instinct to join them in their trance, wrestling with my own curiosity and dread. "It's not safe," I shouted, trying to break their spell. But the words felt feeble against the rising tide of darkness that surrounded us. Then, the ship lurched violently, and I stumbled, losing my grip on the wheel. A wave crashed over the side, soaking us in cold, briny water. I fought to regain control, but the ship was a marionette in the hands of a malevolent force. And then, with a sudden, jarring jolt, we were plunged into chaos. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the chaos as the mariner's dream began to tilt. My heart raced as I clawed my way back to the wheel, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Secure the lines," I yelled, my voice barely piercing the cacophony of crashing waves and howling winds. But it was too late. One by one, I watched as my crew was pulled toward the shimmering light, their faces betraying a mixture of wonder and terror. Thomas struggled against an unseen force, reaching out for me. "Captain, help!" I lunged for him, grasping his outstretched hand just as a monstrous wave crashed over the deck. The water was frigid, biting at my skin as it enveloped us. I felt my grip slip, the slickness of the railing almost losing him to the depths. "Hold on," I shouted, my heart pounding in my chest. As I pulled him back, a sudden calmness enveloped the ship. The tumultuous waves receded, and the light pulsed steadily, as if breathing. The ocean's surface shimmered eerily, mirroring the chaos that lay beneath. "What is happening?" Thomas gasped, pulling himself up to sit beside me, his breath coming in sharp bursts. It felt like something was calling to us. I glanced around at the crew, still mesmerized by the glow below. "We need to get away from here. Now!" I barked, regaining control of the ship. I steered hard to the left, the boat responding sluggishly to my commands. But the pull of the light was stronger than my efforts. The ship turned reluctantly, drifting closer to the eerie radiance. I felt a wave of desperation wash over me. "Start the engines," I ordered, my voice rising above the clamor. With trembling hands, Thomas rushed to obey, the engine sputtering to life with a reluctant roar. The ship shuddered under my command, and for a moment it seemed as though we would break free from the ocean's grasp. But just then, the pulsing light transformed. It flared brightly, illuminating the darkness like a beacon. I squinted into the brilliance, the shadows beneath the surface shifting violently. A terrible realization dawned on me. Whatever was down there was not merely a trick of the light, it was something alive, and it was hungry. The crew's laughter turned to screams as the sea surged, and I caught sight of grotesque shapes breaking through the water, sleek and dark, their eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. "Get below deck," I commanded, my heart racing as I struggled to keep the ship steady. The crew hesitated, torn between terror and that unnatural lure. "Now!" Thomas turned to the others, rallying them. "We have to listen to the captain. Move!" As they scrambled away, I felt the ship buckle beneath me. The lights below us flared once more, a final, desperate plea that echoed in my mind, pulling at my very soul. I steered toward the fading glow, the urge to abandon reason gripping me tightly. With one last surge, The water erupted as something massive breached the surface, an enormous, serpent-like creature glistening in the light. Its maw opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth that glimmered like sharp obsidian. My heart sank as dread filled my chest. This was no ordinary beast, it was a nightmare made real. "Captain." Thomas's voice snapped me from my reverie. I turned just in time to see him slip on the wet deck, his eyes wide with terror as the beast surged forward, closing the distance between us. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The creature lunged, its massive body coiling around the ship, and I was forced to make a choice. I could save my crew or save myself. With a burst of adrenaline, I pulled the wheel hard to the right, trying to swing the ship away from the impending doom. But the mariner's dream was caught in the beast's grip, and as I struggled to regain control, the world tilted sideways. Water poured over the deck as the creature thrashed, and in an instant, the ship split in two. Screams filled the air, mingling with the roar of the ocean as I was thrown against the railing. I clung to it for dear life, watching in horror as my crew was scattered, helpless against the force of nature. And then darkness swallowed me whole. I awoke in darkness, the world around me spinning. My body ached, and the bitter taste of salt lingered on my lips. Panic surged through me as I forced my eyes open, the crushing weight of silence settling in. Where was everyone? As I pushed myself up, the cold water lapped around me, an icy reminder of the chaos I had just endured. I found myself on a fragment of the ship, a splintered piece of wood bobbing amidst the waves. The mariner's dream was gone, swallowed by the depths along with my crew. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, my heart pounding with the realization that I was utterly alone in this vast, merciless ocean. The eerie calmness was almost worse than the storm that had just passed. I strained my ears, searching for any sound of life, calls for help, splashes in the water, but all I heard was the rhythmic lapping of the waves against the wood. Forcing myself to breathe, I scanned the horizon. A blanket of stars stretched above, their twinkling light feeling like a cruel joke in the face of my desperation. The glow from before still lingered in my mind, a haunting memory of beauty intertwined with terror. I clung to the wreckage, feeling the currents tugging at me, threatening to pull me under. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself, pushing away the rising tide of panic. "You need to think." But as I floated, the silence began to morph. It felt as though the ocean itself was watching, its depths concealing untold horrors. Shadows flickered beneath the surface, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being observed. My pulse quickened, a primal fear taking hold. After what felt like hours, I heard a faint sound, a distant splashing, soft but persistent. My heart raced as I turned toward the noise, squinting into the darkness. Was it another survivor? With every ounce of strength, I paddled toward the sound, my arms growing weary with each stroke. The shadows danced below me, and I fought to remain focused, ignoring the creeping dread that clawed at my thoughts. As I drew closer, the splashing grew louder, more frantic. Suddenly, a figure broke the surface, a hand reaching out, fingers grasping for something, anything. "Help!" It was Thomas, his voice strained and desperate. Relief flooded through me. I fought against the waves, pulling him toward me. "I thought you were..." "Don't talk," I interrupted, urgency flooding my words. "Hold on to the wreckage." Together, we clung to the broken piece of the ship, our bodies shivering in the cold night air. The fear in his eyes mirrored my own. "What happened?" he gasped, his breath ragged. "Where is everyone?" I swallowed hard, struggling to articulate the horror. The creature, it took the ship. The others. I don't know. Do you think they made it? His voice trembled, hope mingling with despair. I hesitated, the truth weighing heavy on my heart. I don't know, Thomas. But we have to survive. The water churned around us, the darkness closing in. I glanced toward the horizon, searching for signs of land or another ship. Nothing. Just the endless expanse of black water, swallowing any glimmer of hope. Look! Thomas pointed to the distance, where a faint light flickered on the horizon. What is that? A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. It has to be land or a boat. We need to reach it. We paddled with renewed vigor, the light drawing us closer. But as we moved, the waves began to swell again, and I felt that haunting presence lurking beneath us. The sensation of being watched intensified, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. Do you feel that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Thomas nodded, his face pale. It's like something is out there, waiting for us. A chilling silence descended, broken only by the sound of our frantic breaths. The flickering light remained tantalizingly close, but the ocean felt alive, restless, as if it were toying with us. We pressed on, our limbs heavy with fatigue, the cold water sapping our strength. Just as we neared the light, a wave crashed violently around us, sending us tumbling into the dark water. I struggled to resurface, gasping for air. Panic surged through me as I searched for Thomas, my heart pounding. Thomas! I shouted, my voice lost in the tumult. Then, I spotted him, struggling against the waves, his face etched with fear. Help! He cried, and I lunged toward him, grabbing his arm just in time. But the current was relentless, dragging us apart once more. I fought against it, pulling him close as we clung to each other, desperation fueling my movements. The flickering light shone brighter, revealing a rocky shore nearby, but the creature lurked beneath us, thrashing in the depths, its shadow stretching ominously across the seabed. Keep swimming! I shouted, my voice filled with urgency. We can make it! With all our strength, we began to swim toward the shore, but the waves crashed around us, each swell threatening to pull us under. My lungs burned as I fought against the water, fear and determination mingling within me. And then, as we finally reached the shallows, the creature surged upward, breaking the surface with a deafening roar. We scrambled onto the rocky shore, gasping for breath, but the echo of that terrible sound lingered in the air, a reminder that we were not safe yet. We collapsed onto the rocky shore, our bodies shivering from the cold water and sheer exhaustion. The distant flickering light illuminated the surroundings, revealing jagged cliffs and the remnants of what appeared to be a long-abandoned harbor. It was eerily quiet, the crashing waves muffled by the distance, as if the ocean were holding its breath. Are we safe? Thomas gasped, his voice trembling as he struggled to catch his breath. I nodded, but uncertainty gnawed at me. For now, we need to find shelter and figure out what to do next. We pushed ourselves to our feet, our legs shaky beneath us. The ground felt solid compared to the chaos of the sea, but the ominous presence lingered in my mind. As we walked further onto the shore, the flickering light grew more pronounced, pulsing like a heartbeat. Do you see that? Thomas pointed toward the light. It looks like a building. My heart raced at the thought of finding refuge. We hurried toward it, stepping carefully over the slippery rocks, and as we approached, I could see that it was a small, crumbling lighthouse, its paint peeling and walls weathered by years of neglect. What if it's abandoned? Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We have to take the chance, I replied. It's better than being out here. Pushing the door open, it creaked on its hinges, revealing a dusty interior filled with the scent of damp wood and salt. A spiral staircase led up to the lantern room, and the flickering light seemed to pulse from above. We stepped inside, and I scanned the room for any supplies. Old ropes and fishing gear lay scattered about, remnants of a time when this place was functional. A small table sat in the corner, cluttered with rusted tools and a broken lantern. This place hasn't been used in years, Thomas observed, his brow furrowing. What if the light is just a trick? Let's see if we can get it working, I said, my determination rising. We need to signal for help. As I rummaged through the debris, a sense of urgency consumed me. I knew we couldn't stay here for long. The creature was still out there, lurking beneath the waves, and its presence haunted my thoughts. Look! Thomas exclaimed, holding up an old oil lamp, its glass dusty but intact. If we can find some oil, we might be able to use this. Good thinking, I replied, feeling a spark of hope. I began searching for anything that might contain oil, my heart pounding with each passing second. Finally, in a corner of the room, I found a rusted tin can. It felt heavy in my hand as I opened it, and to my relief, the scent of oil wiped it out. I quickly poured some into the lamp, my hands shaking from adrenaline and fear. Thomas and I worked together to light the wick, and when the flame flickered to life, a warm glow filled the room. We both breathed a sigh of relief, but my relief was short-lived. As we looked out through the cracked windows, the shadows of the ocean danced ominously, and I felt that familiar chill crawling up my spine. What do we do now? Thomas asked, his voice trembling. We wait, I replied, forcing calmness into my tone. We need to see if anyone comes. But we have to be careful. That light may have attracted more than just rescuers. The night dragged on, our senses heightened as we remained on guard. The wind howled outside, rattling the old lighthouse as if trying to warn us. Every creak and groan of the building sent shivers down my spine. Do you think the others are okay? Thomas finally broke the silence, his eyes filled with worry. I swallowed hard, knowing the truth. I don't know. We have to focus on surviving first. Hours passed, and as the sky began to lighten, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I peered out the window, scanning the horizon for any signs of life. Instead, the calm water glimmered ominously, a surface that concealed untold horrors beneath. Just as dawn began to break, the flickering light in the distance vanished, swallowed by the approaching daylight. My heart sank at the thought that we might have lost our only chance for rescue. Did you see that? Thomas pointed outside, his voice trembling. I followed his gaze and froze. Something was moving in the water, dark shapes swirling beneath the surface, their movements unnatural. Get back! I shouted, pulling him away from the window. We need to hide. We scrambled to the back of the lighthouse, finding refuge behind a dilapidated wooden beam. Our hearts raced as we huddled together, the reality of our situation pressing down on us like a weight. The water outside began to churn, and a deep rumbling sound echoed in the distance. I held my breath, fear coiling tightly in my chest. Do you think it's the creature? Thomas whispered, his eyes wide with terror. I don't know, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. But whatever it is, it's not friendly. The ground beneath us trembled as the noise grew louder, and then it stopped abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. I glanced at Thomas, and we exchanged a look of dread. Suddenly, the door of the lighthouse burst open, slamming against the wall. My heart raced as I turned, ready to confront whatever was coming. But as the dust settled, a figure stepped into the light, a stranger, soaked and disheveled, his eyes wild with panic. "Help me," he shouted, stumbling into the room. "They're coming. We have to go." The stranger's presence sent a surge of adrenaline through me. He was disheveled, clothes torn and drenched, his face pale and streaked with salt water. There was a wild look in his eyes, as if he had witnessed something unspeakable. "Who are you?" I demanded, my instincts on high alert. "What do you mean, they're coming?" "Please," he gasped, his voice frantic. "I was on a fishing boat, and we saw something out there, something monstrous. It dragged my crew under, one by one. You have to believe me." Thomas and I exchanged a glance, uncertainty twisting in my gut. "What did you see?" I pressed, hoping to extract more information. He shook his head, trembling. "I don't know how to explain it. It was like a shadow in the water, but massive. And those eyes," he paused, swallowing hard, as if the memory threatened to choke him. "They glowed. They were watching us." I felt a chill run down my spine, the pieces of our terrifying ordeal coming together. "Did it come after you?" "Yes," he replied, desperation in his voice. "I barely escaped. The thing, whatever it is, started to circle the boat, and then it attacked." Thomas stepped forward, his brow furrowed in concern. "What do we do? If it finds us here?" "We can't stay," I interjected, urgency driving my words. "We need to find another way off this island. If it's hunting, we're not safe in this lighthouse." "Wait," the stranger urged, his eyes wide with fear. "You can't just leave. It will track us. We need to find somewhere more secure." My instincts warred within me. The stranger seemed terrified, but there was also a hint of desperation in his tone, as if he knew something we didn't. "Where do we go then?" I asked, hoping for a solution. "There's a cave," he said quickly. "Not far from here, just beyond the cliffs. It leads to the other side of the island. We can hide there." "Is it safe?" Thomas questioned, glancing nervously at the door. "Safer than here," the stranger insisted. "Please, if we don't move now, we'll be trapped." I hesitated, but I could feel the urgency of the moment. I nodded toward Thomas. "We don't have much choice. We'll follow him." "Let's go," I said, my voice firm. We moved cautiously toward the door, our hearts pounding as we stepped into the dim morning light. The shoreline stretched out before us, the waves crashing against the rocks, and as we made our way along the beach, the sense of being hunted lingered in the air. "Stay close," I ordered, keeping a watchful eye on our surroundings. The stranger led the way, his eyes darting nervously as we navigated through the rocky terrain. The cave was hidden behind a cluster of boulders, partially obscured by the thick brush. As we approached, I felt an uneasy sense of foreboding wash over me. "Is this it?" I asked, peering into the darkness. "Yes," he replied, glancing back at us. "It's our best shot." We entered the cave, the damp air enveloping us as the light from outside faded. I could hear the sound of dripping water echoing within, each drop reverberating ominously. "Do you have any supplies?" I asked the stranger, who had fallen silent as he surveyed our new surroundings. He shook his head. "I lost everything when the creature attacked. We just need to wait it out." "Wait for what?" Thomas asked, his voice tense. for it to pass, the stranger replied, his eyes wide with fear. If it's hunting, it'll be searching for prey. We can't be its next target. We settled into the cave, the darkness closing around us like a suffocating blanket. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. Time slipped away as we waited in silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. The stranger paced nervously, glancing at the entrance as if expecting the creature to come bursting through at any moment. Do you think the others made it? Thomas finally broke the silence. I didn't answer immediately, the truth too painful to voice. I don't know, I said finally. But we have to focus on surviving right now. The minutes dragged on, stretching into hours, and just when I thought I could hear the gentle rhythm of the ocean outside, a low rumble echoed through the cave. What was that? Thomas asked, his voice trembling. Shoo! I hissed, straining to listen. The rumble intensified, and I felt the ground tremble beneath us. Panic surged within me. We have to get out of here, I exclaimed. No, the stranger urged, grabbing my arm. It's too dangerous. We'll be trapped. But before I could protest, a deep growl resonated from the cave entrance, sending chills down my spine. The creature was near, its presence overwhelming. My heart raced as I exchanged terrified glances with Thomas and the stranger. Stay quiet, I whispered urgently. We pressed ourselves against the cold, damp walls, breath held as the growl grew closer, the shadows shifting ominously in the entrance. And then, suddenly, it was there, a massive silhouette looming against the entrance, dark and foreboding. The creature's eyes glowed like two lanterns in the darkness, fixated on us with a predatory gaze. We were trapped. Panic surged through me as the creature's presence filled the cave. Its eyes gleamed with an otherworldly hunger, reflecting a darkness deeper than the night outside. Stay still, I whispered, urging Thomas and the stranger to press against the cold rock, as if blending into the wall could hide us from the monster. The growl reverberated through the cave, a deep sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath us. In that moment, I could feel my heart racing, each beat echoing in my ears. I dared to glance at Thomas, whose eyes were wide with terror. The stranger's breath came in quick, shallow gasps, his body trembling beside me. The creature moved forward, its massive form blocking the entrance. I could see its scales glistening, dark and slick, as it pushed deeper into the cave, drawn by the scent of our fear. Run! I shouted suddenly, adrenaline surging through me. We have to get out. With a burst of energy, I bolted past the stranger, who seemed momentarily frozen in shock. I grabbed Thomas's hand and pulled him along, racing deeper into the cave. Wait, the stranger yelled, scrambling after us. We can't just run. I ignored him, fear propelling me forward. The cave twisted and turned, an endless maze of shadows and darkness, and the echo of our footsteps sounded like thunder. I could hear the creature behind us, its growls growing louder as it pursued us, relentless and determined. We need to find a way out, I gasped, my lungs burning as we ran. The cave opened up into a wider chamber, and I skidded to a halt, scanning the area for any exit. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged teeth, and the walls glistened with moisture. In the center, I noticed a narrow passageway leading further into the darkness. Over there, I pointed, desperate for an escape. We rushed toward the passage, our hearts racing as the growl of the creature echoed closer. The stranger pushed past me, his eyes wide with fear, and Thomas followed close behind. Go! I shouted, shoving the stranger into the narrow opening. I'll hold it off. No, Thomas protested, grabbing my arm. We can't leave you behind. I'll be fine, I insisted, desperation fueling my words. Just go. I'll find you. With a last glance at Thomas, I turned and faced the dark passageway from which we had come. The growl resonated through the chamber, and I could feel the ground vibrating beneath my feet as the creature approached. Go! I yelled again, my voice rising above the growl. Finally, I saw them slip through the narrow opening, and then they were gone. I was alone, and a cold wave of dread washed over me. The growl grew louder, and I could see the creature's form moving through the shadows, its eyes locked onto me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I turned and sprinted deeper into the cave, desperate to put distance between me and the creature. I navigated through the winding passages, my heart pounding in my chest, praying that Thomas and the stranger had found safety. As I ran, I could hear the creature's claws scraping against the stone, its growl resonating like a death knell. I stumbled through the darkness, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I searched for an exit. Suddenly, I saw a faint light ahead, a glimmering beacon in the dark. Hope surged within me, and I pushed myself harder, charging toward it. I burst into a wider chamber and skidded to a stop, taking in the scene before me. The light emanated from a small pool of water, its surface shimmering like liquid silver. The walls were adorned with strange markings, ancient symbols that pulsed with an eerie glow. But I had no time to examine them. The growl erupted behind me, a terrifying sound that echoed through the cave, and I felt the ground shake beneath me. I sprinted toward the pool, glancing back just in time to see the creature emerge from the shadows. Its massive form blocked the passage I had come from, and I could see its glistening scales shimmering in the dim light. I reached the edge of the pool and skidded to a halt, my heart racing as I scanned for an escape. The water beckoned, and I knew I had to make a choice. In a split-second decision, I leaped into the pool, the cold water enveloping me as I plunged beneath the surface. I swam frantically, propelling myself forward, desperate to escape the creature that loomed above. The water was murky, and I could barely see, but I felt the current pulling me deeper into the darkness. I held my breath, the pressure building in my chest as I swam blindly, my mind racing with fear and determination. The growl echoed above me, but the water muffled the sound, and I pushed myself harder, searching for a way out. I needed to find air. I couldn't hold my breath much longer. Just as I felt my lungs burning, I saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. I kicked harder, feeling the rush of adrenaline fueling my every movement. I swam toward it, breaking through the surface and gasping for air. I found myself in another chamber, the air thick with humidity and the scent of damp earth. I coughed, taking deep breaths as I blinked away the water from my eyes. But I had no time to rest. The growl echoed once more, reverberating through the chamber, and I knew I had to keep moving. I scanned my surroundings, searching for an exit. To my right, I noticed a narrow opening, barely large enough for me to squeeze through. Without hesitation, I sprinted toward it, diving into the passage just as the creature emerged behind me, its glowing eyes filling the entrance with a terrifying light. I crawled through the narrow passage, my body scraping against the rough stone, and I could hear the creature's breath growing louder, echoing in the confined space. Please, let this lead somewhere safe, I thought, my heart racing as I pushed myself forward, every inch feeling like a battle for my life. The narrow passage twisted and turned, the air growing staler with each passing moment. I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest, desperate to escape the creature's pursuit. The growls echoed behind me, a constant reminder that it was right on my heels. I stumbled through the darkness, scraping my arms against the rough walls. The sound of water dripping echoed ominously around me, a reminder of the terror lurking just behind. Please, I thought, urging my legs to move faster. I can't let it catch me. As I crawled forward, the passage began to widen, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I would find an exit. Maybe there was a way out of this nightmare. Suddenly, I broke through into another chamber, larger than the last, and for a moment, I stood in awe of my surroundings. Crystals lined the walls, shimmering in the dim light like stars in a night sky. But there was no time to admire the beauty. The growl of the creature echoed loudly behind me, shaking me from my reverie. I turned, panic rising within me as I realized the creature was right outside the entrance, its massive form blocking my escape. I glanced around the chamber, searching for a weapon or anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes fell on a sharp crystal jutting out from the ground, glinting ominously in the low light. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice trembling as I picked up the crystal, its weight feeling both reassuring and dangerous in my hand. The creature stepped forward, its eyes glowing brightly as it peered into the chamber. I could see the scales covering its body, glistening with moisture, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. Think. I urged myself, heart racing as I held the crystal tightly. As the creature lunged forward, I instinctively swung the crystal at it, hoping to deter its advance. It struck against the creature's scales, sending a sharp pain through my hand but also stunning it momentarily. The creature recoiled, letting out a deafening roar that shook the very walls of the chamber. I took my chance and sprinted past it, adrenaline fueling my escape. I dashed deeper into the chamber, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I searched for a way out. The growl of the creature echoed behind me, furious and relentless. "Where do I go?" I shouted into the darkness, my voice trembling with fear. I spotted another passageway on the far side of the chamber and sprinted toward it, the crystal still clutched tightly in my hand. As I entered the passage, I could hear the creature crashing behind me, its movements heavy and thunderous. I could feel the ground shaking as it pursued me, and I knew I had to move faster. I raced through the winding passage, my heart pounding in my chest, praying it would lead me to safety. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I fought against the rising panic threatening to overwhelm me. Finally, I burst through another opening and found myself on the edge of a cliff, the ocean stretching out below me, waves crashing violently against the rocks. The creature followed close behind, its growl reverberating through the air as it emerged from the shadows. I stood frozen for a moment, my heart racing as I realized I was trapped. "No!" I shouted, backing away from the edge. "I won't let you take me." With no other choice, I turned and faced the creature, my grip tightening around the crystal. It lunged forward, its massive jaws open wide, ready to strike. In a moment of sheer desperation, I threw the crystal with all my strength, aiming for the creature's eyes. It struck true, and the creature let out a deafening roar, reeling back in pain. Seizing the opportunity, I turned and sprinted along the edge of the cliff, searching for any way to escape. The growl of the creature echoed behind me, but I pushed myself forward, refusing to let fear stop me. The cliff sloped down into a narrow ledge, and I leaped onto it, my feet scrambling for purchase. I glanced back to see the creature stalking me, its eyes filled with rage. "Stay away!" I yelled, desperation fueling my voice. As I moved along the ledge, I felt the ground shift beneath me. I stumbled, nearly losing my balance, but I caught myself just in time. "Keep going," I urged myself, pushing forward. The ledge narrowed, and I could see the water crashing violently against the rocks below. I could feel the spray on my face, a reminder of the danger lurking just beneath the surface. The creature charged at me, and I could feel the ground tremble as it approached. I had to find a way to stop it. I reached the end of the ledge and turned to face the creature, my heart pounding in my chest. "You won't take me," I shouted, my voice echoing in the air. The creature lunged, but I ducked just in time, feeling the rush of air as it flew over me. I spun around, desperation surging within me as I saw the cliff edge ahead. In one final act of defiance, I leaped off the ledge, plunging into the water below. The cold shock enveloped me as I sank beneath the surface, the creature's roar echoing above me. I kicked and thrashed, propelling myself upward, my lungs burning as I fought for air. Just as I broke the surface, I glanced back to see the creature standing at the edge of the cliff, its eyes locked onto me, furious and unyielding. It let out a final roar, echoing through the air, before turning and disappearing into the shadows. As I gasped for air, the realization of my escape washed over me. I had survived, but the terror of what I had witnessed lingered in my mind. I swam toward the shore, the waves crashing around me as I fought against the current. With every stroke, I felt a mixture of relief and dread, knowing that I had escaped the creature but not the memories of what had happened. When I finally reached the beach, I collapsed onto the sand, gasping for breath. My body trembled from exhaustion, but I was alive. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the ocean. I looked out at the waves, knowing that I had escaped the creature, but the weight of my experience pressed heavily upon me. I would never forget what I had seen, the darkness lurking beneath the surface. And though I had survived, I knew that I would carry the scars of that encounter for the rest of my life. As I lay on the beach, staring out at the endless ocean, I realized that sometimes survival comes at a cost. The psychological scars of fear and trauma would linger long after the creature was gone, a constant reminder of the darkness that dwelt beneath the surface. And in that moment, I understood that the true horror lay not just in what I had faced, but in the shadows that would follow me long after I had escaped. Secrets of the Bell Tower. It began with a question. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? I often found myself contemplating this as I stood outside the old church, the shadows of the towering bell tower looming over me like a specter from a forgotten time. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the sky above was a muted gray, as if it were mourning something long lost. I had moved to this small town in search of a fresh start, leaving behind the chaos of my life in the city. The church, with its crumbling stone walls and faded stained glass, seemed like the perfect refuge. The locals whispered tales of the bell tower, claiming it was haunted by the spirits of those who had died in tragic circumstances. I scoffed at the stories. After all, ghosts were nothing but figments of imagination, right? Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the graveyard, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that settled in my bones. On my first evening in town, I ventured inside the church, drawn by the melodious tolling of the bells. Each chime echoed through the dimly lit sanctuary, reverberating off the walls and sending chills down my spine. I watched as the heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing an elderly woman who seemed to embody the very essence of the church itself. Her silver hair framed a face etched with lines of wisdom and sorrow. "Welcome, dear," she said, her voice a soft melody that belied the gravity of her words. "The bells have a way of calling to those who are lost." Her gaze pierced through me, and for a moment, I felt as if she could see the shadows of my past lurking just beneath the surface. Do you believe in ghosts? I asked, attempting to dismiss the growing apprehension within me. She chuckled lightly, a sound like rustling leaves. Oh, my child, the ghosts are not the ones to fear. It is what they bring with them that holds the true danger. Her eyes drifted toward the bell tower, a hint of something dark flickering within their depths. I shrugged off her words as mere superstition, but as night fell and the town quieted, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The bells rang again, their sound echoing through the stillness. It was almost midnight. I stood at the window of my modest rented room, gazing out at the church, its silhouette stark against the starless sky. Just then, I saw movement in the graveyard, a figure cloaked in shadow. At first, I thought it was merely a trick of the light, but as the figure drew closer, I could make out the distinct outline of a person. Panic surged through me, and I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, heart pounding. The figure paused beneath the bell tower, its presence both familiar and foreign, and then vanished as swiftly as it had appeared. What was that? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I told myself I was just tired from the move, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But as I turned away from the window, the echoes of the bells rang in my ears, each toll sending shivers down my spine. They felt almost like a call, an invitation to uncover the mysteries that lay hidden within the walls of the church. That night, sleep eluded me. The weight of my thoughts pressed heavily on my chest as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I replayed the stories of the townsfolk in my mind, each tale a thread woven into the fabric of the church's history. What if there was truth in their words? I dismissed the notion again, forcing myself to focus on the mundane aspects of my life. But as dawn broke, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I had awakened something. The bell tower stood silent, its secrets locked away, yet I felt an unexplainable urge to unravel them. Little did I know, my curiosity would lead me down a path fraught with danger and despair. The next morning brought with it an unsettling stillness. The sun struggled to pierce the clouds, casting a muted light over the town. I made my way to the church, the cobblestone path winding like a forgotten memory. Each step felt heavier, as if the earth itself was reluctant to let me tread upon it. As I entered the church, the smell of old wood and incense enveloped me. The elderly woman was at the altar, her frail hands meticulously arranging a bouquet of wilted flowers. She looked up as I approached, her expression unreadable. "Did you come to seek solace?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I suppose," I replied, glancing at the dusty pews. "I'm just trying to understand this place. The stories." "Ah, the stories," she interrupted, her gaze drifting to the towering bell tower. "They are more than mere tales, they are warnings. Each chime of the bell brings forth memories, memories that refuse to fade." I felt a chill at her words, the air suddenly thick with tension. "What do you mean?" "Every time the bell tolls, it stirs the spirits of the past," she explained. "They wander the earth, seeking what they lost. And those who hear the bells may find themselves drawn into their sorrow." I shook my head, dismissing her ominous warning. "It sounds like folklore." "Folklore is built on truths, dear. It is you who must decide what to believe." She turned away, leaving me standing there, pondering her words. Determined to confront my fears, I decided to climb the bell tower. Each creaking step echoed in the silence, a rhythmic reminder of the passage of time. When I reached the top, the view took my breath away. The town sprawled beneath me, bathed in the soft glow of the morning light. But that beauty was fleeting. As I gazed out, I noticed something strange. Shadows moved in the periphery of my vision, darting between the gravestones below. My heart raced as I strained to see, but nothing was there, just the whispering wind and the distant rustle of leaves. Then, as if summoned by my thoughts, the bells began to toll. Each chime sent vibrations through the air, resonating deep within me. With each strike, I felt a weight settle in my chest, a sense of dread that grew heavier. I had come to discover the truth, yet I felt the truth was unraveling before me, and I was helpless to stop it. As the last toll faded, an unnatural silence enveloped the tower. It was then that I heard a whisper, soft, almost inaudible, yet chilling enough to send a shiver down my spine. "Help us." I whipped around, scanning the tower for the source, but there was no one. The chill of fear gripped me. What had I just heard? I pressed my palms against the cool stone, steadying my breath. This was madness. As I descended the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had awakened something within those walls. I was no longer just a curious visitor, I had become part of the church's haunting tale. By the time I reached the bottom, the sun had begun to dip once more, casting long shadows that twisted and turned like living entities. I stepped outside, and my gaze was drawn again to the graveyard. The figure from the night before materialized in my mind. Its presence was undeniable, and I knew I had to confront it. Before I realized it, I was walking toward the graves, each step accompanied by the sound of my own heartbeat. The air felt charged, electric, as if the spirits themselves were watching, waiting. As I approached a cluster of stones, a sudden chill swept through me, wrapping around my shoulders like a cold embrace. I stopped at a weathered grave, its inscription barely legible. A name caught my eye, Anna. I knelt down, tracing the letters with my fingertips. A feeling of sadness washed over me, deeper than I had ever known. The wind picked up, swirling around me, carrying whispers that felt like cries for help. Suddenly, I heard it again, "Help us." This time, it was clearer, echoing through the air. Panic surged within me as I stood, heart racing. I stumbled back, ready to flee, but a shadow moved again, lingering at the edge of my vision. I turned, breath hitching in my throat, and there it was, the figure I had seen before, now standing among the graves. It was a girl, no more than 10 years old, with hair as dark as the night and eyes that glimmered with a sorrow I couldn't fathom. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you have to help me." I stood frozen, the weight of her gaze pinning me in place. The world around me faded, leaving only the girl's haunting presence. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as she took a tentative step forward, the shadows clinging to her like a shroud. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely rising above a whisper. She hesitated, glancing back at the gravestones as if they were watching her too. "I'm Anna," she said softly. "I need your help. They won't let me go." "Who won't?" The question escaped my lips before I could stop myself. A part of me wanted to turn and run, to escape the chilling reality of the moment, but I was rooted to the spot. There was something about her, something in the way she looked at me, that stirred a deep sense of empathy. The ones who died here, they are trapped. The bells wake them up, but they can't find peace. Her voice trembled, each word laced with a sadness that seemed to echo through the graveyard. "You can help us, if you listen." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The stories about the church, the whispers of the townsfolk, all of it was suddenly very real. I glanced back at the church, its silhouette darkening against the twilight sky. The old woman's words echoed in my mind, "It is you who must decide what to believe." "Why me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I don't know how to help you." Anna stepped closer, her ethereal form shimmering in the fading light. Because you can see us. You're not afraid. Not like the others. The realization hit me like a cold wave. I wasn't afraid, I was curious. But curiosity was a dangerous thing, and as I stood there, the weight of the situation pressed down on me, suffocating and inevitable. What do I need to do? I asked, my voice steadying with determination. Listen to the bells, she urged, her eyes wide with urgency. They will guide you. But be careful, not all who awaken are friendly. Some are angry, and they will try to take you with them. A gust of wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic, like blood. I took a step back, heart racing. What do you mean by take me? The tolling will begin soon. You must be ready, she replied, her form flickering like a candle flame. You have to find the truth before it's too late. With that, she began to fade, the shadows wrapping around her until she vanished completely, leaving me standing alone in the graveyard. The air felt charged, vibrating with an energy I couldn't comprehend. I stumbled back toward the church, my thoughts racing. What had just happened? Was Anna a figment of my imagination, or was she a ghost trapped between worlds? I had to know more. The warnings hung heavily in the air, but my curiosity pulled me back toward the bell tower. As I climbed the steps once more, the unease within me grew. The last rays of sunlight flickered out, replaced by the dark embrace of night. I reached the top, heart pounding, and looked out over the town. The shadows danced below, twisting and turning in the faint light. Then, the bells began to toll, their sound echoing through the night like a death knell. Each chime reverberated deep within me, tugging at the corners of my consciousness. It was an eerie symphony, a call to something I couldn't yet understand. With each toll, the air grew colder. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end as the whispering began again, voices melding into one another, desperate and pleading. Help us, find us, release us. I gripped the edge of the stone wall, struggling to steady my breath. The fear that had gripped me earlier returned with a vengeance, tightening around my throat. The tolling continued, the echoes merging into a cacophony that filled my mind. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the sensations swirling around me. And then, silence. I opened my eyes to find the tower cloaked in darkness, the world outside shrouded in shadows. Panic surged within me. Where was Anna? Had she returned? Suddenly, I felt a presence beside me, cold and oppressive. I turned slowly, dread creeping in. A figure loomed in the shadows, its form indistinct but unmistakably there. Did you come to join us? A voice rasped, low and mocking. I stumbled back, my heart racing as I faced the unknown. What do you want? I shouted, my voice trembling. The figure stepped into the faint light, revealing a face twisted in anger, eyes gleaming with an otherworldly hunger. We want what was taken from us, it hissed. Join us, and you will learn the truth. The bell tolled again, the sound resonating through the tower, and I felt the walls closing in. I couldn't stay here. I had to escape. With a burst of adrenaline, I turned and fled down the stairs, the echoes of the bell following me, their rhythm a relentless reminder of the danger that loomed above. As I burst through the church doors, I was engulfed in the cool night air, gasping for breath. I glanced back at the bell tower, its shadow looming ominously against the starless sky. The whispers returned, swirling around me, pulling me deeper into the mystery that had begun with a simple question. But the answer was becoming clearer. I was in over my head, and the deeper I delved, the more perilous my path would become. The cool night air bit at my skin as I stumbled away from the church, my heart still racing from the encounter in the bell tower. The dark streets of the town were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like a blanket smothering the sound. I quickened my pace, every shadow feeling like a threat lurking just beyond the light of the street lamps. What had I awakened? The bell tolls had summoned something sinister, and Anna's warning echoed in my mind. I needed answers. Once back in my rented room, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, breathing heavily. The dim glow of the lamp flickered, casting unsettling shadows that danced across the walls. I could still hear the tolling of the bells ringing in my ears, a haunting melody that pulled at my consciousness. As I paced the room, I recalled Anna's words, "You can help us, if you listen." I sank into a chair, trying to calm the storm within me. My phone lay on the table, its screen dark and silent. I picked it up, scrolling through the list of contacts, hesitating before typing a message to the only person I trusted back home. "I'm not sure I'm safe here. I need help." As I hit send, the silence in the room became oppressive. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 1 a.m. My thoughts raced back to Anna. I had to go back to the church, back to the graveyard. I couldn't ignore the pull I felt toward her. After a moment's hesitation, I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The streets were deserted, the moonlight casting an otherworldly glow on the cobblestones. I felt the weight of the night pressing down on me as I made my way back to the church, the toll of the bells echoing in the distance. As I approached the graveyard, the shadows lengthened around me as if they were alive, shifting and writhing in the darkness. The air felt charged, electric with the weight of the unspoken. I crossed the threshold into the graveyard, the crunch of gravel beneath my feet the only sound breaking the silence. "Anna?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you here?" The night was still, but I felt a presence, an energy that seemed to pulse around me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I want to help you," I said, hoping my words would reach her. Suddenly, a chill swept through the air, and I caught a glimpse of a figure near the old oak tree, its form flickering like a candle flame. I rushed toward it, hope surging in my chest. "Anna!" I shouted, but as I drew closer, the figure shifted, revealing a woman dressed in tattered clothes, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. She wasn't Anna. "Why have you come here?" The woman's voice trembled, her breath visible in the cold air. "Do you not understand the danger?" I'm here to help," I stammered, taking a cautious step back. I saw Anna. She told me to listen. "Anna is lost," the woman replied, her voice filled with anguish. "We all are. The bells are a curse, not a blessing. They bind us to this place, and we cannot rest." "What do you mean?" I pressed, desperation clawing at my insides. "How do I break the curse?" She pointed a skeletal finger toward the bell tower, her gaze filled with a mix of fear and longing. "You must uncover the truth behind the bells. Only then can you free us." "Tell me more," I urged, stepping closer, but the air around us shifted, growing colder. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The bells were once a signal of hope, but they became a toll for the damned. A tragedy occurred long ago, a betrayal that sealed our fates. You must discover what happened, or we will remain trapped forever." Before I could respond, the figure began to fade, her form dissolving into the night. Panic surged within me. Wait. What tragedy? How do I find the truth? But she was gone, leaving me standing alone among the graves, the weight of her words settling over me like a shroud. I had to go to the church's archives, where the town's history was stored. Perhaps I could uncover the truth behind the bells and their dark history. I turned to leave, my mind racing, but as I reached the edge of the graveyard, a sudden noise echoed through the night. The bells began to toll again, their sound a mournful wail that resonated deep within my chest. Each chime sent tremors of fear coursing through me, urging me to flee. But I couldn't run. I was drawn to the sound, a magnetic pull that compelled me to return to the church. I ran toward the building, the tolling growing louder, each chime echoing like a heartbeat. As I stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick with anticipation, and the flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the pews. I could feel the spirits swirling around me, their presence palpable. "Help us," the whispers returned, filling the sanctuary with desperation. I climbed the steps to the bell tower, each step echoing the tolls resonating in my mind. As I reached the top, I was met with the sight of the massive bells, their surfaces worn and darkened by time. The air was heavy with the scent of metal and dust, and the tolling seemed to reverberate through my very soul. I stood before the largest bell, its inscription barely visible. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cool surface, and a sudden wave of energy surged through me. Visions flooded my mind, a flash of a woman, her face twisted in grief, a man standing in shadow, betrayal etched into his features. The bell tolled again, and I gasped, stumbling back. I had seen it, a glimpse of the past. There was a story here, and I was determined to unravel it. The visions faded, leaving me reeling, my heart racing as I leaned against the cold stone wall of the tower. The tolling of the bells resonated in my chest, urging me to piece together the fragmented memories I had just glimpsed. The weight of the past bore down on me, an invisible shroud that threatened to consume my thoughts. As I steadied myself, I knew I needed to understand the story behind the bells, what had happened here long ago that had led to so much suffering. I descended the staircase with urgency, the whispers of the spirits echoing in my mind. Back in the sanctuary, the church felt alive, every shadow pulsating with energy. I made my way to the church's archives, a small room tucked away behind the altar, filled with dusty books and faded records. The musty scent of old paper surrounded me as I rifled through the stacks, searching for anything that could shed light on the mystery. I found a large leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle. As I flipped through the pages, I came across an entry about the church's founding. The names jumped out at me: Father Michael, the church's first priest, and Anna, a young girl who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. A chill ran through me as I read about the tragic events that had unfolded. The entry described how Anna had been beloved by the townspeople, her laughter echoing through the church halls. But one fateful night, a storm rolled in, and she disappeared. Rumors spread that she had been taken by a dark force, and her absence cast a shadow over the town. The final entry sent shivers down my spine. It spoke of the tolling bells, which had been blessed to protect the town. But on the night of Anna's disappearance, they had begun to toll endlessly, as if mourning her loss. And so, the bells toll for the lost, it read. They awaken the spirits who linger in search of what was taken from them. The words resonated with a profound sense of sorrow. Anna had not merely vanished, she had been claimed by something darker, something that fed on grief. I looked up from the book, heart pounding. I had to find out what had happened that night, and I needed to speak to the townspeople who had lived through it. I hurried back outside, my mind racing with questions. The night was still heavy with shadows, the moon hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds. I made my way to the nearest house, a small cottage that had once belonged to an old woman who had known Anna. As I approached, I noticed a flicker of light from within. I knocked on the door, my heart thudding in my chest. Moments later, it creaked open, revealing a frail man with deep-set eyes that reflected a lifetime of sorrow. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "I'm looking for information about Anna," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I need to know what happened to her." His expression darkened, and he stepped back as if to close the door. "Leave it be, child. Some things are better left buried." "Please," I pressed, desperation clawing at my insides. "I'm connected to this. I heard the bells tolling, and I saw her. I need to understand." He studied me for a moment before sighing deeply. "Fine. But you should know that the truth can be a heavy burden to bear." He led me inside, and the warmth of the room contrasted sharply with the chill of the night. The walls were lined with photographs, some faded, others still vibrant. I could see Anna's face among them, her smile bright and carefree. "Anna was a light in this town," he began, his voice low and somber. "But the night she disappeared, everything changed. We thought we could protect her. We thought the bells would keep her safe." He paused, his gaze drifting to a photograph of a stormy night. "But the storm came, and with it, a darkness we couldn't understand. She went out to play, and we never saw her again." My heart raced. But what really happened? Was there someone else involved? A man? His expression hardened. There were whispers of betrayal, of someone who sought to harness the power of the bells for their own gain. They said the bells were cursed, that they would call forth spirits when the tolling became too frequent. They could awaken the dead. A chill ran down my spine. But the town still rings the bells? Out of fear, mostly. Fear of the spirits and what they might do if they remain restless, he replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. But it is also a signal, a warning. The ones who have died are not truly gone. They walk among us, seeking solace. I absorbed his words, the weight of his story pressing down on me. What can I do to help? He looked at me, eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. You must confront the truth. The only way to put the spirits to rest is to uncover what happened to Anna. You need to go back to the church, back to the bells. The urgency in his voice resonated with me. I couldn't turn back now. I was too deeply entwined in this mystery. Thank you, I said, determination flooding my veins. I'll find the truth. As I left his home, the weight of the night bore down on me. The bells rang out in the distance, their toll echoing through the darkness, a reminder of the work still ahead. I had to return to the church, but this time I would face the darkness head-on. The shadows whispered around me as I made my way back, the cold air thick with anticipation. As I reached the church, the doors creaked open, and the haunting tolling filled the air, urging me to confront the past that had lingered for so long. The church loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the night sky, the tolling bells urging me forward. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of dust and old wood enveloping me, but tonight it felt different, charged, alive with energy. The air was thick with the whispers of spirits, swirling around me like an unseen current. I climbed the stairs to the bell tower, my heart pounding in sync with the tolling bells. Each step felt heavier, the weight of the past pressing down on me, but I couldn't turn back now. I needed to confront whatever lay hidden in the shadows. As I reached the top, the view from the tower took my breath away. The town spread out below, shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from flickering lanterns and the pale moon struggling to break through the clouds. But the bells, oh, the bells, their massive forms loomed above me, each one a testament to the sorrow that hung in the air. I approached the largest bell, its surface cold and rough beneath my fingertips. The inscription was barely legible, but I traced the letters with my hand, trying to connect with the history imbued in this place. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the tower, and the bells began to toll once more, each chime resonating deep within me. I staggered back as a vision hit me, a flash of light, a girl's laughter, and then darkness swallowing her whole. I gasped, feeling the weight of grief wash over me. Anna's spirit was close. I could feel her presence, and she was desperate for release. "Anna!" I cried, my voice echoing through the tower. "I'm here. I want to help you." The tolling stopped abruptly, and the air grew still. A figure emerged from the shadows, a girl with flowing hair and eyes that shimmered like the night sky. It was Anna, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "Help me," she whispered, her voice fragile and haunting. "You must understand what happened to me." "I'm trying," I replied, stepping closer. "I need to know the truth. What caused your disappearance? Who betrayed you?" Her gaze turned sorrowful, and she pointed toward the church's foundation. "The answer lies beneath. The betrayal was not just from one, but from many. They sought power, and I was the key." "Power?" I echoed, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" "The bells were meant to protect, but they can also bind. The darkness that claimed me was a part of a greater plan. They thought they could control the spirits, harness their strength, but it backfired," she explained, her voice trembling. "Now, we are all trapped, forced to relive the night of my loss." A chill ran down my spine as her words sank in. The bells had not merely tolled for her, they had become a prison for the souls who had perished. But how do I free you? How do I break this cycle? Find the heart of the church, where the first toll rang. There you will find the truth, she urged, her voice filled with urgency. But beware, for the darkness will not let you go easily. It will try to stop you. Just as quickly as she appeared, Anna began to fade, her figure dissolving into the shadows. "Wait!" I shouted, but she was gone, leaving me alone in the tower, the weight of her words heavy in the air. I needed to act quickly. I made my way down the stairs, determination coursing through my veins. I had to find the heart of the church, the place where everything had begun. As I entered the main sanctuary, I looked around for clues. The flickering candles cast eerie shadows on the walls, and I felt the weight of countless eyes watching me. The presence of the spirits was palpable, a chorus of whispers urging me forward. I scanned the room, searching for something, anything that could guide me. Then I noticed a door at the back, slightly ajar. My heart raced as I approached it, each step echoing in the stillness. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices pleading and warning. Pushing the door open, I stepped into a small chapel that had been long forgotten. Dust hung thick in the air, and the light from my phone illuminated a simple altar adorned with faded flowers. In the center was a small wooden box, intricately carved and worn with age. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, the whispers intensifying as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of items, old letters, a lock of hair, and a small bell that seemed to vibrate with energy. I picked it up, and the moment I did, the air around me shifted. A vision exploded in my mind, a stormy night, a group of figures gathered in the church, their faces twisted with greed. They were chanting, invoking a dark force to gain control over the spirits bound to the bells. But in the chaos, Anna had been drawn into the darkness, her laughter fading as the storm raged outside. "No!" I gasped, the realization hitting me like a tidal wave. The betrayal was not just personal, it was a collective sin, a pact made in desperation that had led to Anna's demise and the suffering of so many. As I held the small bell tightly, I felt the energy around me shift, a pulsing force that connected me to the spirits trapped within. I had to confront the darkness that lingered, to break the cycle and free Anna and the others. I stood up, determination coursing through my veins. "I will set you free," I vowed, my voice ringing out against the walls. "I will confront the darkness that binds you." Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and shadows began to swirl around me. I could feel the presence of the malevolent force, a darkness that sought to consume me. The whispers turned to screams, urging me to flee, but I stood my ground. "Show yourself," I shouted, the words echoing in the chamber. "I will not be afraid." The shadows coalesced into a form, a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing like embers. "You dare disturb the balance?" it hissed, a voice that chilled me to the bone. "You will regret this." "I'm here to end the cycle," I declared, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "I will not let you take any more lives." The figure laughed, a sound like shattering glass. "You think you can defeat me? The darkness is part of this place, and it will never let you go." But I gripped the small bell tighter, feeling the power it held within. "No! I have the truth on my side. You cannot hold these souls captive any longer." With a surge of energy, I rang the small bell, the sound reverberating through the chamber. The darkness screamed, the shadows writhing and twisting in response. Light burst forth from the bell, illuminating the room and pushing back the shadows. "Anna!" I cried, feeling her presence beside me. "Come to me. We will break this together." The light intensified, and I felt the spirits around me rising, their energies merging with the power of the bell. The figure recoiled, its form dissipating under the force of the light. "And oh," it shrieked, its voice echoing in despair. "You cannot do this." But I pressed forward, channeling all my will into the bell. "You will not win. You will not keep them." With one final push, the light engulfed the room, banishing the darkness and flooding the space with warmth and hope. I felt Anna's spirit beside me, her strength intertwining with mine, and together we broke the chains that bound the souls. As the light faded, I stood alone in the chapel, the air heavy with the remnants of the battle. The shadows had receded, and a profound silence fell over the space. I had done it. I had freed them. But at what cost? As I looked around, I realized that the echoes of the past would linger, the scars of what had happened still etched into the very foundation of the church. "Anna?" I whispered, hoping to feel her presence once more. "Are you here?" A gentle breeze swept through the chapel, carrying with it a soft whisper. "Thank you," it said, filled with warmth and gratitude. "You have set us free." Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes as I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The tolling of the bells rang out, no longer a mournful wail, but a beautiful melody, a signal of hope and healing. As I left the church, I knew the truth would live on in the hearts of those who remembered Anna and the sacrifices made. The darkness had been vanquished, but the memories of those lost would forever remain, a reminder of the fragile line between light and shadow. The first light of dawn filtered through the stained glass windows, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the chapel. I stood in silence, absorbing the transformation that had taken place. The heaviness that had weighed on the church seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of serenity. But as I stepped outside, the world looked the same, shrouded in the gentle mist of early morning. The town was waking up, and I could hear the faint sounds of life, the rustling of leaves, the distant chatter of townsfolk starting their day. Yet, something felt different, as if the air was charged with an unspoken understanding. I made my way through the cobbled streets, my heart racing with uncertainty. The townspeople had lived under the weight of the church's secrets for so long. How would they react now that the darkness had been confronted? Would they understand the significance of what had transpired? As I approached the marketplace, I noticed familiar faces, their expressions filled with curiosity. Whispers followed me, snippets of conversations carrying a mix of skepticism and intrigue. I could feel their eyes on me, probing, seeking answers. "Have you seen her?" a voice called out. It was Miriam, the baker's wife, her eyes wide with concern. "We heard the bells toll all night." "I have," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor of anxiety within me. "I spoke to Anna. She's free now." Gasps erupted from the small crowd that had gathered. "Free?" someone echoed, disbelief etched across their face. "The spirits have been released. The darkness that haunted this town is gone," I explained, feeling the weight of their collective curiosity. "But what does that mean for us?" Miriam asked, her brow furrowed. "Will the bells toll again?" "They will," I assured them, "but not with the same sorrow. The tolling will now carry a message of hope and remembrance, a tribute to those who have suffered." As I spoke, I noticed a flicker of understanding in their eyes, but the fear still lingered, a shadow on their hearts. "You must come to the church," I urged. "We need to honor the past together and reclaim our future." Slowly, the crowd began to move toward the church, uncertainty mingling with curiosity. As we entered the sanctuary, I could see the light dancing on the walls, illuminating the dusty corners and bringing life to the forgotten space. "Gather around," I said, my voice echoing softly. "We must remember Anna and all those lost to the darkness. We need to acknowledge their pain and celebrate their freedom." I placed a small bell on the altar, its presence grounding us. Let this bell ring not just for the dead, but for the living. Let it remind us that we are stronger together, that we can overcome even the darkest of nights. One by one, the townspeople stepped forward, sharing their memories of Anna, the laughter, the warmth, the joy she had brought to their lives. As they spoke, the atmosphere shifted, weaving a tapestry of connection and healing. The weight of sorrow began to lift, replaced by a collective strength that filled the room. When it was Miriam's turn, she stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. "I remember the day she went missing. The storm was raging, and we all searched for her, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. We felt powerless, alone in our grief." Her voice broke, but the townsfolk rallied around her, a show of solidarity that sparked something within me. "But we are not powerless anymore," I said, my heart swelling with determination. "Together, we can turn our grief into strength." With each shared memory, the tolling of the bells echoed in the background, a melody that intertwined with our stories. The church felt alive with energy, a sacred space where past and present converged. As the sun began to rise higher in the sky, a sense of calm enveloped us. We lit candles and placed them on the altar, each flame representing a memory, a life once lived. "May this light guide the spirits home," I whispered, feeling a profound connection to all that had transpired. As we stood together, I knew this was only the beginning. The scars of the past would remain, but they were no longer something to be feared. They were reminders of resilience, strength, and the importance of community. In the weeks that followed, the town transformed. The tolling of the bells became a symbol of renewal rather than sorrow. Each chime echoed through the streets, calling the townsfolk to gather and celebrate life, to remember those who had been lost, and to honor their stories. I found myself drawn into the fabric of the community, my life intertwined with those around me. Together, we planted gardens in memory of Anna, painted murals depicting her laughter, and organized gatherings that brought us closer. We shared our fears, our dreams, and slowly began to heal the wounds that had been festering for so long. But there were still moments when shadows crept in, reminding us of the darkness we had faced. During one such evening, as I walked through the town square, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt thick, and a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I glanced toward the church, its silhouette stark against the twilight sky. The bells rang out, a beautiful melody, but something felt off. The harmony was punctuated by a discordant note, a whisper of darkness lurking beneath the surface. Rushing toward the church, I pushed open the doors, the familiar scent of incense mingling with the musty air. As I stepped inside, I felt a rush of energy, a ripple of unease coursing through the space. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling slightly. "Is anyone here?" But only silence greeted me, the shadows flickering as the candles danced. I moved deeper into the sanctuary, my heart racing. Then, I heard it, a faint whisper, like a distant echo, threading through the air. "Help us." I froze, the voice sending chills down my spine. It was a plea, a cry for help that resonated deep within me. I glanced around, searching for the source. "Who's there?" I demanded, feeling a surge of protective instinct. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, their forms translucent and flickering like candlelight. The spirits of the past, bound by the echoes of their own grief, reached out to me, their faces twisted in anguish. "No!" I shouted, my heart pounding. "You were freed. What is happening?" "We are still here," one of the spirits said, her voice a haunting whisper. "Though we were released from the darkness, we remain bound to this place, our stories unresolved. We cannot find peace." Panic welled within me. "But I thought I had set you free. What do you need?" The spirits gathered closer, their eyes filled with sorrow. "Our stories must be told. We need to be remembered, to be honored in truth, not just in memory. The darkness cannot be vanquished until we are free to speak." Realization dawned on me. The tolling of the bells had not merely awakened them, it had also brought forth the burden of their unresolved stories. I understood what I had to do. "Then let us tell your stories," I urged, my voice resolute. "I will gather the town. We will honor you, remember you, and give you the voice you seek." The spirits seemed to relax, their forms shimmering with a newfound hope. "Thank you," they whispered in unison, their voices echoing through the church. I rushed back into the town, gathering everyone I could find. "Come. We must honor the spirits. They need to share their stories." As we assembled in the church, the air grew heavy with anticipation. The townspeople looked around, uncertainty etched on their faces, but I could see the flicker of hope in their eyes. One by one, the spirits began to share their tales, stories of love, loss, betrayal, and redemption. As they spoke, the townsfolk listened, their hearts opening to the pain that had been buried for far too long. Tears flowed freely as the stories unfolded, weaving a tapestry of shared experience. The darkness that had once bound us began to lift, replaced by a sense of unity and understanding. When the final spirit shared her story, silence enveloped the room. I felt a wave of warmth wash over me, a confirmation that we had done something profound. As the last words faded, a soft light filled the church, illuminating the space in a warm glow. I could feel the spirits around us, their energies intertwining with ours, a sense of gratitude washing over them. "Thank you," they whispered, their voices fading like a gentle breeze. "We are free." With that, the air lightened, and the shadows retreated, leaving behind a sense of peace that filled the church. The tolling of the bells rang out, clearer and more beautiful than ever before, a melody that celebrated the interconnectedness of our lives. The town had transformed, not just in the physical sense, but spiritually. We had faced the darkness together, shared our stories, and emerged stronger. The tolling bells would always serve as a reminder of our resilience, of the power of remembrance, and the importance of honoring those who came before us. As I stood in the church, surrounded by my community, I realized that while the past could never be erased, it could be transformed into a source of strength and healing. We would carry our memories forward, ensuring that no spirit would ever feel lost or unheard again. And in that moment, I knew that the echoes of the bell tower would resonate not just with the weight of sorrow, but with the promise of hope, love, and the unwavering spirit of those who had fought for their freedom. Shadows on the walls. I still remember the day I moved into my new apartment. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue across the city as I pulled up to the old brick building that would become my home. It was quaint, almost charming, with its ivy-covered walls and creaky wooden stairs. As I unloaded my belongings, a mix of excitement and trepidation filled the air. I was finally free from the chaos of my previous life, but deep down, I felt a nagging sense of unease. "Are you sure this is the right place?" my friend Jake had asked when we first found the listing online. The pictures had been alluring, but I could sense the doubt in his voice. I brushed it off, convinced that a fresh start was precisely what I needed. Inside, the apartment felt small but cozy. The living room was bathed in soft light, thanks to the large windows that opened to a view of the bustling street below. I set my boxes down and took a moment to breathe in the unfamiliar scent of the place, a mix of old wood and something I couldn't quite place. I felt a flicker of anticipation. As night fell, I settled in, arranging my furniture and unpacking my belongings. The apartment had a strange charm to it, a character I hadn't expected. But as the darkness deepened, an unsettling silence enveloped the space. The city sounds outside faded away, leaving me with nothing but the faint hum of the old heating system. Later that evening, after a long day of moving, I decided to unwind on the couch. I flicked on the television, but the static buzz of the screen did little to distract me from the growing weight of the stillness around me. I glanced at the walls, noting how the shadows seemed to dance in the corners of my vision. I shook my head, attributing it to fatigue. Suddenly, I noticed something peculiar. A shadow, darker than the rest, flickered on the wall near the window. I squinted, my heart racing slightly as I leaned closer. It was just a trick of the light, I assured myself. Perhaps a branch swaying outside. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was simply exhausted. But as I settled into bed that night, the feeling of unease returned. The shadows loomed larger, more pronounced. I pulled the covers tightly around me, trying to ward off the cold dread that crept in from the corners of my mind. My first night in the apartment passed without incident, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, a side effect of my recent upheaval, but a tiny voice whispered that there was something else, something lurking just beyond my comprehension. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder, was this truly the fresh start I had sought, or was it merely a step into the unknown? The following days blurred into a routine, and I found solace in the mundane tasks of unpacking and arranging my new home. The sunlight streamed through the windows each morning, filling the rooms with warmth and light, almost erasing the lingering shadows that had danced in my mind. Yet, the unease never fully left me. I attributed it to my adjustment to the new surroundings, but I could feel something lurking just beneath the surface. One evening, as I was brushing my teeth in the small bathroom, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror. I turned quickly, expecting to see a reflection of the bustling street outside, but instead, I found only my own wide eyes staring back at me. I shook my head, brushing it off as a trick of the light, but my heart raced as I finished my routine. That night, as I lay in bed, the shadows seemed to elongate, stretching towards me from every corner of the room. I told myself that it was just the way the light from the street lamp outside filtered in, casting odd shapes on the walls. Yet, there was a nagging feeling deep within me, an awareness that perhaps there was more to the shadows than met the eye. Then came the first incident. It was a particularly stormy night, the rain tapping against the windows like frantic fingers. I had just settled into bed, the storm a comforting backdrop to my solitude, when I heard it, a soft, scratching sound coming from the living room. My heart raced as I strained to listen, the sound growing louder and more insistent. I hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. Summoning my courage, I slipped out of bed and padded silently down the hall. The dim light from the street illuminated the edges of the living room, casting flickering shadows. As I approached the source of the noise, I could see the old bookshelf swaying slightly, though there was no draft in the room. I could have sworn I saw something dart behind it, a fleeting shadow that disappeared as quickly as it had come. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking slightly. The room fell silent, the storm outside drowning out any other sound. I stepped closer, peering behind the shelf. Nothing. I sighed, feeling foolish for letting my imagination run wild. Yet, that night, as I climbed back into bed, I felt a chill run down my spine. The shadows on the walls seemed to shift and move, almost as if they were alive. I pulled the covers tighter around me, desperately trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. The next day, I decided to distract myself by exploring the neighborhood. I wandered through quaint little shops and cozy cafes, hoping to find a sense of normalcy. But the shadowy presence lingered in my mind, and every time I returned home, I felt a growing sense of dread creeping in alongside me. It wasn't until I met my neighbor, Mrs. Jensen, that I began to learn about the building's history. She was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, who welcomed me with a plate of cookies as I introduced myself. "You must be new to the building," she said, her voice tinged with a knowing tone. "It's quite an old place, you know. Many stories attached to these walls." "Stories?" I asked, trying to mask the unease that crept back into my heart. "Oh, yes," she continued, her expression shifting to one of nostalgia. "Some say it's haunted. Strange things happen here, especially at night. But it's probably just old pipes and creaky floors." She chuckled lightly, but I could see a glimmer of concern in her eyes. As I left her apartment, the weight of her words settled heavily on my chest. Perhaps there was something to the whispers I had dismissed. But I couldn't let fear dictate my life. I had made this choice for a reason, and I intended to find my place in this new world, no matter the shadows lurking within it. That night, however, as I lay in bed, the feeling of being watched returned with a vengeance. I tried to close my eyes and will it away, but the scratching sound returned, more persistent than before. It was followed by a soft whisper, a voice just beyond the reach of my understanding. My breath hitched in my throat as I slowly turned my head toward the wall, where I felt the shadows swirling in an almost palpable haze. The atmosphere felt charged, thick with a presence that chilled me to the bone. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperately wishing for morning to come. When I finally opened them, dawn's light spilled through the window, bathing the room in a golden glow. I sighed in relief, thinking I had imagined it all. But deep down, I knew something was amiss. The shadows were still there, waiting patiently, lurking just beyond my perception. The days drifted on, yet the feeling of unease clung to me like a shadow. I attempted to shake it off, to embrace the apartment as my sanctuary, but the whispers in the night and the shadows on the walls became an uninvited part of my life. Each night, I lay awake, straining to differentiate between reality and the waking nightmares that invaded my thoughts. I began to notice patterns, subtle changes in the shadows that grew more distinct each night. They moved with an almost deliberate intent, stretching and curling as if reaching out for something. I often found myself holding my breath, peering into the corners of the room, convinced that I'd catch a glimpse of the dark figures that haunted me. One evening, I decided to confront my fears head-on. Armed with a flashlight, I wandered through the apartment, determined to dispel the lingering shadows. I shone the light into every corner, illuminating the dark spaces that had become a source of dread. "Show yourself," I called out, half joking, half terrified. But only silence answered, the air thick with tension. As I moved to the living room, the shadows seemed to retreat from the beam of light, momentarily vanquished. I felt a surge of triumph, but it was short-lived. Just as I began to relax, the flashlight flickered and died, plunging me back into darkness. "Great," I muttered, panic creeping in. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, the only source of light left. With its dim glow, I continued my exploration, but my heart raced as I passed the old bookshelf again. Suddenly, the scratching sound returned, this time louder and more insistent. I froze, feeling a wave of terror wash over me. My hands trembled as I aimed the light toward the noise. There, in the corner of the room, I could see something shift, a shadow moving in a way that defied logic. "Is someone there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The room responded only with silence, but I could feel the air grow heavier, charged with something I couldn't quite understand. Then, without warning, the shadow darted toward me, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. My heart pounded in my chest as I fled into the safety of my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I pressed my back against it, trying to calm my racing heart. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in bed, wide awake, clutching the sheets as though they could protect me from whatever presence lingered in the apartment. The whispers seemed to echo in the back of my mind, tantalizing and tormenting, like a distant melody I couldn't quite grasp. The next day, I was determined to find answers. I visited the local library, hoping to uncover the history of my building. As I browsed through old newspapers and archives, I stumbled upon a faded article about a tragic incident that had taken place years ago, a fire that claimed the lives of several tenants. The details were sparse, but the weight of the tragedy lingered in the air as I read. "They say some never leave," the librarian said quietly, observing my interest. "Old buildings like that can hold on to memories, even the painful ones. Some people believe the spirits of those lost can linger, seeking solace or closure." I felt a chill run down my spine. Had I unwittingly moved into a haunted space, a place where the echoes of the past were still very much alive? The shadows, once merely an annoyance, now felt like a haunting presence, tangible and unsettling. That night, I returned home with a sense of foreboding. As darkness fell, I steeled myself against the sensations that had plagued me. I lit candles, their flickering flames casting soft light across the room, creating a barrier against the encroaching shadows. But as the hours wore on, the atmosphere thickened, suffocating and heavy. I could feel the whispers swirling around me, growing more distinct as though they were beckoning me to listen. I tried to block them out, but my resolve began to crumble. In a moment of desperation, I decided to speak to whatever was haunting me. "If you're here, please show yourself," I implored, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I mean you no harm. I just want to understand." The room fell silent, and for a moment, I thought I had imagined it all. But then, from the depths of the shadows, a hand emerged. It reached out, slender and pale, fingers stretching toward me as if grasping for something just out of reach. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled back, hitting the wall. The shadows danced, swirling around the hand like mist, and I could feel the coldness seep into my bones. "Please," I begged, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" But the hand remained suspended in the air, a phantom reaching for something lost. I felt tears prick at my eyes as fear and empathy battled within me. This was no longer just a specter, it was a soul in distress, trapped in the limbo of its own making. With that realization, a resolve formed within me. I couldn't ignore this presence any longer. If there was a chance to help, to understand what bound this spirit to the apartment, I had to confront it. As I prepared for the confrontation that would inevitably come, I wondered what awaited me in the depths of the shadows. I had opened the door to a world I didn't fully comprehend, and now there was no turning back. The next few days were filled with an uneasy tension. I could no longer dismiss the shadowy presence in my apartment as mere figments of my imagination. The hand that reached out to me felt real, and I knew I had to understand the source of its pain. Each night, I sat awake, the candles flickering and casting long, wavering shadows, waiting for the spirit to reveal more of itself. I delved into the history of the building, digging deeper into the archives. I found out more about the fire, a tragic event that had claimed not only lives but the dreams and hopes of those who had once called this place home. The names of the victims echoed in my mind, each one a reminder of the lives lost. Among them was a woman named Evelyn, who had lived in my apartment. The reports mentioned her as a kind soul, always helping her neighbors. Determined to learn more, I reached out to Mrs. Jensen, my neighbor. She was more than willing to share what she knew. Evelyn was beloved in this building, she said, her eyes clouded with nostalgia. She was always looking out for others, but when the fire happened, no one could save her. They say her spirit still wanders, searching for closure. Closure? I echoed, my heart racing. What do you think she wants? I'm not sure, Mrs. Jensen replied, her voice lowering to a whisper. Some believe she's trying to reach her loved ones. Others think she's simply lost and unable to move on. That night, I prepared myself for a confrontation. I set the room as I had before, lighting candles and ensuring I had a clear view of the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest as I summoned the courage to reach out to Evelyn. "Evelyn," I called out softly, my voice echoing in the stillness. "I know you're here. I want to help you find peace. Please, let me know how." For a moment, nothing happened. The shadows hung thick in the air, holding their breath as if waiting for a cue. But then, as the candles flickered, the familiar hand emerged from the darkness once more. This time, it wasn't just a silhouette. I could see the contours of the fingers, delicate and trembling. "Evelyn," I whispered, my voice quaking with emotion. "I understand you're hurting. Can you show me what you need?" The hand twitched, then slowly gestured toward the corner of the room where a small, dust-covered box lay forgotten beneath a stack of old magazines. I felt a surge of understanding wash over me, as if the shadows themselves were guiding me to the answer. I approached the box cautiously, my heart racing. It felt like a portal to the past, holding secrets and memories waiting to be uncovered. As I opened it, I found letters tied with a frayed ribbon, yellowed with age. They were addressed to Evelyn, filled with words of love and longing from someone named Thomas. The letters spoke of dreams, of plans to marry and build a life together. My heart ached as I read the final note, which detailed Thomas's despair upon hearing the news of the fire. He had never found closure, never said goodbye. I realized then that Evelyn's spirit lingered not only because of her tragic death, but also due to her unfinished love story. "She's looking for him," I murmured to myself, understanding the weight of her sorrow. As I turned to the shadows, I could see the hand reach out again, fingers stretching toward me, yearning for connection. "Evelyn," I said softly, "you need to find Thomas. You need to let him know you're here." The atmosphere shifted, thickening as if the weight of the past pressed down on me. I felt the energy in the room pulse, a desperate hope mingling with sorrow. The shadows around me began to dance wildly, swirling as if caught in a tempest of emotions. "Let me help you," I continued, my voice steadier now. "If you guide me, I promise to find a way to bring your message to him." The hand hesitated, then slowly withdrew, fading into the shadows. For a moment, I felt the loss of connection, the emptiness where her presence had been. But then, as if sensing my despair, the shadows began to coalesce, forming a figure that stood before me, an outline of a woman with sorrowful eyes. I gasped, my heart racing. "Evelyn?" The figure nodded, a soft, mournful smile gracing her lips. I felt a rush of emotion as she stepped closer, her essence illuminating the dimness of the room. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing like a distant melody. "Help me remember." With that, the shadows shifted, swirling around us as memories began to materialize. I was engulfed in a rush of images, moments of joy, laughter, and love shared between Evelyn and Thomas. I watched them together, their happiness radiating like light. But then, the vision darkened, replaced by the terrifying flashes of the fire. I saw Evelyn, caught in the chaos, reaching out for someone, her love, her life slipping away. I felt her fear, her desperation, and my heart ached for her loss. The vision faded, and I returned to the dim room, my breath hitching in my throat. "Evelyn, I promise to help you find him," I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. In that moment, the shadows grew softer, more gentle. I could feel the weight of her grief begin to lift, replaced by a sense of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice now laced with warmth. "Thank you for hearing me." As she began to fade into the shadows, I felt a profound sense of purpose blossom within me. I had opened the door to the past, and now I needed to close it for her. In the days that followed, I became consumed with the task at hand. The letters I had discovered burned in my mind, each word echoing the love story that had been abruptly cut short. I needed to find Thomas, to help Evelyn say the goodbye she never had the chance to offer. I dove into my research, scouring local records and archives to track him down. Hours turned into days, each moment filled with a mixture of hope and dread. I found snippets of information that pointed to a Thomas, a man who had lived in the same town but had since disappeared. Friends and family spoke of him with a mix of fondness and sorrow, often recalling the love he had for Evelyn and the heartbreak he endured after the fire. Finally, after much searching, I uncovered an address that sent a shiver down my spine. Thomas had moved away after the tragedy, seeking solace far from the memories that haunted him. He had settled in a nearby town, and the realization filled me with urgency. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I needed to reach out to him. Armed with a letter that detailed Evelyn's love and the connection we had shared, I drove to the address I had found. My heart raced as I pulled into the quiet neighborhood, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. As I approached the door, I hesitated, anxiety bubbling within me. What if he didn't believe me? What if he had moved on, buried his past? I knocked, my knuckles rapping softly against the wood, and waited. Moments felt like hours, but finally, the door creaked open. Before me stood a man in his late 50s, his face weathered but kind. There was a glimmer of recognition in his eyes as he took in my presence. "Can I help you?" he asked, curiosity etched across his features. "I hope so," I replied, my voice steady despite the anxiety swirling within. "My name is..." I paused, unsure how to explain my connection to Evelyn. "I've recently moved into the apartment where Evelyn lived before the fire." At the mention of her name, Thomas's expression shifted. His eyes softened with a mixture of sadness and longing. "Evelyn," he whispered, the name escaping his lips like a prayer. "I miss her every day." I took a step closer, my heart racing. "She reached out to me. I found her letters, and she wants you to know that she's still with you, that she loves you." Tears welled in his eyes, and I felt the weight of years of grief etched into his soul. "I thought I had lost her forever," he said, his voice breaking. "I've lived with that pain for so long." I handed him the letters, watching as he unfolded them with trembling hands. Each word seemed to come alive as he read, the love between them resonating through the air. I could see the emotions shifting in him, hope mingling with sorrow, grief melting away into a fragile smile. As he finished reading, he looked up at me, the tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I had to carry this alone." "It's not just you," I said gently. "Evelyn is still here, watching over you. She wants you to find peace, to know that she never wanted to leave you." In that moment, I felt a warmth envelop us, a soft glow that pulsed with the echoes of Evelyn's love. The shadows that had haunted me for so long began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of connection and understanding. As Thomas spoke about their dreams and the life they had planned, I felt Evelyn's presence beside us, a comforting energy that resonated within the space. It was as if she were finally getting the chance to say what had been left unspoken for far too long. "I need to let her go," Thomas said, the acceptance dawning on his face. "It's time to honor her memory, not just with my grief, but with love." And in that moment, I understood the power of closure. It wasn't just about saying goodbye. It was about carrying the essence of our loved ones with us, allowing their memories to live on in our hearts. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the room, I felt a shift in the air. I knew Evelyn was ready to find her peace. I turned to Thomas, my heart swelling with hope. "Let's do this together," I said, extending my hand to him. "Let's honor her memory." He nodded, wiping the tears from his cheeks. Together, we lit a candle in her name, allowing its flame to symbolize the love that would never be extinguished. As the flickering light illuminated the room, I felt the shadows retreat, softening and fading into the background. I could sense Evelyn's spirit lingering, a gentle presence that filled the space with warmth and love. "Goodbye, Evelyn," I whispered, my heart filled with gratitude for the connection we had forged. "Thank you for letting me be a part of your story." In that moment, I felt her presence lift, a gentle breeze that swept through the room, leaving behind a sense of serenity. The shadows that had once felt suffocating now felt lighter, infused with love and remembrance. As I left Thomas's home, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had helped Evelyn find her closure, and in doing so, I had discovered my own strength. The shadows on the walls had transformed from a source of fear into a testament of love, a reminder that even in darkness, light could still prevail. And as I drove home, I couldn't help but smile, knowing that both Evelyn and Thomas would carry each other in their hearts forever, their love unbroken by time or circumstance. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.